Order the October 3rd, 2018 special and regular meeting of the Palm Springs City Council. Would everyone please rise for the presentation of the colors? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you to the Palm Springs Junior ROTC Color Guard. Everyone, please be seated. City Clerk, roll call, please.
Councilmember Holstedge.
Present.
Councilmember Kors.
Here.
Councilmember Middleton. Present. Mayor Pro Tem Roberts.
Present.
Mayor Moon.
Present. Okay, the next item is presentations. Dr. Reddy, it looks like we have a presentation tonight, and hopefully there's no bugs in the system. That was a joke, sorry.
Mayor, did you want to introduce our speaker? From the mosquito vector control?
Surely. I'd like to introduce the Coachella Valley Vector Control Director, Jeremy Witt, who is the General Manager, and he'll be talking about bug spraying.
And the district reached out to us and wanted to just brief council and our citizens because they are doing some additional vector control spraying activity, and so we thought it would be good if they came and just briefed us on what they are doing. Thank you. Hey, Jeremy.
What's in the bag that I brought you tonight? There we go. First and foremost is what I'm here to talk about tonight was our area-wide mosquito control operations. So this yellow document that you have in the bag is what went to residents where we're actually doing our work against the invasive mosquito. So that's something that you can reference while I talk. Also in the bag is some of the information that we hand out to residents about invasive mosquitoes that we have here in the Coachella Valley, but also in Southern California. And so that's for your information. And then there's some more information in there about some of our programs, as well as some of our outreach materials that we've been focusing our campaign this year, specifically targeted at this new mosquito that we have. So like Mr. Reddy said, I will be talking a little bit about what we're doing in Palm Springs currently, and really the spike in this invasive mosquito, what the district is doing to protect the public health. We are a public health agency, and that's our mission, is protecting the health of the residents here in Palm Springs, as well as all of Coachella Valley. And also what we're asking for the community, because this is really a community-wide problem, and we're going to be really focusing over the next several years at getting the assistance and the help from our community members to make this as effective as it can be. So invasive species, so this means this mosquito doesn't belong here in the Coachella Valley. We're not unique. This has been happening all across Southern California and into the Central Valley of California. But I'll now talk about Palm Springs itself. We detected this mosquito back in 2016 in a small area of about 200 homes. Since that point in time, it's grown to include an area that we have detected this over 5,000 homes or residences. Why is this important? Well, the threat to our community and to the folks that live in Palm Springs or visit Palm Springs, it's a day biter. We don't have a mosquito. If you've been around the U.S. or in places where you get eaten up when you go camping, those mosquitoes vary by what they like to bite, and this mosquito is a mammal biter, so it likes to bite you, likes to bite your animals, and it will bite during the daytime, and so it's a very aggressive pest. It's also a vector, so it does transmit very horrible pathogens to people. It does prefer to feed on us, like I said, and it's capable of transmitting chikungunya, dengue, yellow fever, and most recently in the headlines has been Zika. So what has the district been doing? We've been educating, but also going door to door. We've been to close to over 3,000 residences over the last year in Palm Springs, and doing education, doing source removal. This mosquito is a specialist at small containers. So anything from a bottle cap in somebody's backyard is a potential source for this mosquito to reproduce. So it's very hard to control once it's in a neighborhood, because it could literally be in everybody's backyard. We've been doing education, been having events, educating our school districts and how they can look for mosquito sources around them. And we're really be focusing, like I said, on the communities and also on our other community stakeholders. In particular, with this campaign, why are we doing this now in the city of Palm Springs? Last year we did some aerial campaigns aimed at reducing the population. And currently, Palm Springs and Mecca are where we have the highest population of this mosquito. So in Mecca, we're actually doing an aerial campaign to reduce the numbers. And in Palm Springs, we're using truck-mounted applications. These are techniques that have been used successfully in other campaigns, specifically back in 2016 when there was a Zika outbreak in Miami that you may remember. This was one of those strategies that deemed very effective in reducing the number of mosquitoes and stopping local transmission. And that's where we're at in Palm Springs. These pathogens that this mosquito transmits are pathogens that people are the reservoir or can hold them, so people can travel abroad, they can go to South America, Asia, come back with these viruses in their body, and now we have this mosquito locally that can actually bite those people when they return and have local transmission. And so we're trying to keep the populations reduced and also at a level that prevents local transmission. And so part of this campaign is to reduce those numbers. And so what we're doing currently, as you'll see on that yellow flyer, is we're doing a series of 5 applications targeted at lowering the population in that specific area that's designated on the handout here. And to be specific, our application area is between the roads of Ramon Road, Sunrise Way, Via Charisma, and then the mountain range. So long-term mosquito reduction can only succeed, though, through elimination of these sources. And so while these applications are very effective and quick and knocking the population down, we're going to be targeting that community really to get rid of these backyard sources. We can't get it in everybody's backyard, and it's really going to take a community effort, much more so than it has in the past. Traditionally, our mosquitoes in the valley, especially urban areas, have been associated with catch basins and things that are a little bit easier to access. This mosquito now can be in a cap full of water. It can be in your swamp cooler. So it's going to take the diligence of our community members to be having this just as you're taking out the trash weekly, you're going out looking for standing water in your backyard, dumping it, and eliminating those containers. And if we're all doing that, the district's doing everything we can to protect the public health. It's really going to take the investment of the community to get rid of this mosquito successfully. So when I talk about those sources, these are those sources: plant saucers, buckets, bird baths, toys left outside, septic tanks can potentially be a source, and tires. And you'll be surprised how much stuff people have in our backyard. And it's good, again, we're asking the residents to really be diligent and doing this weekly to make sure that water from a summer rain event or from your sprinklers is not accumulating and causing a breeding source in your backyard. And with that, I can take any questions from the council regarding our efforts. Yeah, and if the residents have any questions about that, they can contact our district and go to our website, cvmosquito.org. You can put that in the search engine. If you go to our control activities, there's a section on larviciding, and then there's also a link there where residents can learn more about what we're doing and why we're doing it, and also about the products that we're using, so they can get more information from us, but also from other reliable sources such as the CDC and other public health agencies.
Sure. Are there any things that you need that you have not received from us that would help you in this effort?
As far as from the city and from the city's been really responsive, where we've been working with city staff to get the information out to our residents, getting information out on your website. I would say, I mean, from my standpoint, we just recently completed a strategic plan for our district for the next 3 years. And part of that's going to be engaging all of our cities and the county in our effort to really make sure within city properties, future planning really takes into account what could potentially become a mosquito source on a city property. And that's something that we would be glad to work with the city staff to make sure, looking over plans, irrigation plans, because a lot of the issues that we deal with, we are, as we all know, in a desert. And 99% of our mosquito sources come from irrigation and potentially bad irrigation practices. And if we can start to make a dent in that, both at the city level, but this also then in the neighborhoods, will really make an impact on our local mosquitoes, including this invasive mosquito.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Someone came actually to my house and just tested my backyard, so good thing I had 0. But I was actually surprised at how many containers that were out there that could be possible. So thank you for your work. I appreciate it. I was just wondering, you said in your presentation that you had used helicopters before, and this year you're using trucks, and I don't quite understand what that looks like. So could you explain that to the residents? Because I get a lot of questions about how it's affecting the neighborhoods.
There's 2 methods to get, it's called wide area larviciding, and so the strategy and also the challenge for vector control or mosquito control is to get a very wide coverage and control. And when we're talking about this mosquito in particular, these Aedes aegypti, we just can't. We do have ability to get into residences, but it's very hard. And when we're trying to knock the population down very quickly, these area-wide applications are very effective, very targeted at mosquitoes, and also very safe. Last year, there's two ways to do that. You do it from the helicopter, which can cover a very large area, but also has other associated costs with it, and also noise issues. And that was one thing that we experienced with the district really more than anything last year was complaints regarding, hey, there's a helicopter out, in my neighborhood at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, what's going on? And so based on the Miami-Dade strategy several years ago, they were using truck-mounted applications. So again, it's applying this larvicide against a larvicide aimed at controlling the mosquito larvae in these little containers, can go also by truck. And so a truck has a spray unit on the back that sends this little powder into the air, and then it floats down into these mosquito sources and kills the mosquito larvae. And the problem with this mosquito, like I said, it can be in a bush, in a cup, it can be really anywhere. And so this strategy using this product Vectobac, which is a bacterial protein that is approved by the EPA, but also it's a product that we use in organic operations. So it's very focused, it's very safe, and it's very effective. And it can get into all these little cryptic sources that we just can't see and potentially can't even see when we do a property inspection to really knock down the population. And then one other issue with this is this mosquito lays eggs that can last for 6 months. So that you can have a container in the backyard. This mosquito can lay eggs that can dry out, and that's one of the issues why it's most likely moved around the valley. People take their stuff with them, and these eggs can travel. And that's a challenge with this mosquito in particular.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Thank you. That worked.
We're not going to be able to use it because...
Sorry.
Okay.
All right. Well, if we need direction on it. Thank you for coming and thank you for your report. Two questions. If a citizen wants extra coverage, let's say they have a commercial site or they have a home with a half-empty pool and they want you to come and treat their yard or their property, is there an easy way for them to get that?
As far as like a property inspection?
Not an inspection, a treatment. So if they know they have a situation where they have a vacant house or a half-full pool or someplace where they know they have stagnant water issues and they can't get rid of it, like let's say a half-empty pool,
Yeah,
can they contact you to have you come out and purposefully treat their site?
Yeah, so what they can do, make a service request. And so say, for example, with a half-empty pool, that's been a big source for the district for many years, especially since the housing bubble burst. And that's one thing that we are working on, but we can't come out. The major way we deal with that is putting mosquito fish. We raise mosquito fish that are basically a guppy that can live in that pool and eat anything, mosquito larvae, anything else that goes in there.
But essentially, if they want treatment, you guys will come right.
We'll
if
come
they
out
call
there,
you,
we'll assess it, and then
you'll do a
do
check.
what we need to
Okay,
make
and then
sure it's not a problem.
I think you answered this question, but I was awake the other day when the truck came down my street.
Okay.
And I heard it and saw it. I also saw one of my neighbors walking their dog who went running in the other direction with their dog, terrified. What is the real, if any, threat to people and animals who are right there walking down the street when you guys are spraying this stuff?
Yeah, there's really no threat to them. I mean, it's safe. It's made to be applied as a public health pesticide. And so at the rates that we use, there's no need to avoid it. We recommend that you don't. I mean, we do typically shut off when we do see somebody or we can see someone's in the way, we'll stop. But there's real no need to run the other way. If you want to be out of the area, we suggest that you stay inside 30 minutes and 30 minutes after application. But these products are designed and labeled to protect public health, and so the way they're applied for the general public, it's completely safe, unless they're mosquito larvae.
Okay, and you have information, if individuals want more information on those aspects of it, if they're concerned about the threat to their kids or animals,
That is correct.
You have very clear data on that to share with them? Okay.
They can go to that, I mentioned that Control Activities website, but also our website has all of our control products, and they can click on the labels that gives them the information.
Will you state for our online and TV audience your phone number and your website?
Yeah, our website is cvmbcd.org, or you can just type in CV mosquito and it should come up.
CV mosquito, like Coachella Valley mosquito? Okay.
And then as far as our phone number, it's 760-342-8287.
8287.
And they can call and again select if they're concerned about mosquitoes. They'll select the mosquito function, and then I'll go to our call center and they'll arrange if they want a service request or if they have information.
But if they
that'll get
Google
directed.
CV mosquito, your site will come up
We'll be number
easily?
one. Yep,
Okay,
that'll
thank
be the
you.
easiest way.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. All right, thank you, Mayor.
Okay, next item, acceptance of the agenda. The city council at this time will discuss the order of the agenda and may amend the order, add urgency items, no abstentions or no votes, and consent calendar items, and request consent calendar items be removed from discussion. I would like to entertain a motion for acceptance of the agenda. Items council members would like removed from the consent calendar.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't know the item number, but I'd like to pull the agenda item on the New City trash receptacles.
C.
Is that C? Okay, I'd like to go ahead and pull that to a date uncertain. We want to go through a little more process with our Sustainability Commission and with our Main Street organization before that's ready for council.
So you want to table it?
Yeah, basically table it to a date uncertain. 5C?
Yep. Councilmember Middleton? It was 1C, wasn't it? Purchase of new trash, site recycling bins, and news racks? Okay. Oh, it's 5C. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, Councilmember Middleton?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On item 1C, I will be recusing myself from that portion of the agenda that includes a reimbursement to me for a travel claim.
Councilmember Holstage?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to pull 1D. I'm going to give a short report about it. And then 1F, I just have a very quick change to the minutes. So I think we need to pull those as well. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Holstage. Okay, do we have a motion to accept the agenda as amended with the following items pulled from the consent calendar? Item 5C, we're just on consent calendar right now. Items 1C, 1D, and 1F, and item 5C will be tabled. Motion to approve by Councilmember Kors, seconded by Councilmember Holstage. Motion is on the floor.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Okay, first, next item is next item is report of closed session. Mr. Kotkin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. We did meet and convene at 4:30. We did not have the opportunity to discuss the existing litigation item. We did discuss 5 matters of anticipated litigation, one of them being the noticed matter that is noticed by name. We only had time for 2 of the matters of initiated litigation. We did not have time to discuss the real estate matters that are noticed on the agenda. And as to the labor negotiation discussions, we only took up the unrepresented employees. There was no reportable action taken in closed session, and that concludes my report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Kotkin. Next item is public testimony for non-public hearing agenda items only. This time has been set aside for members of the public to address the City Council only on agenda items. 2 minutes will be assigned to each speaker. Testimony for public hearings will only be taken at the time of the hearing, and general public comments, non-agenda items, will be taken later in the meeting. Currently, we have 5 people requested to speak. The first one is Robert McCann, second is Bob Heinbaugh, and then third is Paul Hendrickson. Robert McCann, are you here? Okay, because he's not here. Next speaker, Bob Heinbaugh, and then Paul Hendrickson, then Melissa Curiel, and then B.G. Slate.
My name is Robert Heinbaugh, and I'm a resident of Palm Springs. I wish to thank the mayor and the city council for addressing the tobacco retailer permit, County Ordinance 838.2. As its passage will bring Palm Springs not just into the 21st century, but a place where we say to our community, It's residents and businesses and visitors that we place a premium on the lives of our visitors, on the lives of our children. We value their health and well-being and will do what is necessary to protect their health from the use of tobacco and its byproducts. While they may not recognize the actions that we're taking on their behalf now, someday they will know that their lower insurance premiums because of of never using tobacco products are as a result of what we're doing in this chamber. While they may not recognize the actions we're taking on their behalf now, someday they will know that the job that they are hired to fill is because they do not smoke and therefore will not cost their employer higher health care premiums. While they may not recognize the actions that we are taking on their behalf now, someday they will know that the housing unit they wish to occupy will be theirs because they do not use tobacco products, thus decreasing the recovery costs of the owner. One last thought. While they may not recognize the actions that we're taking on their behalf now, someday they will know that the potential grab me by the heart and spin my head spouse who they might meet in college, in the military, at their work site, wherever they might be, may say yes with enthusiasm simply because we stopped today's kid from smelling like an ashtray. And I cannot imagine wanting to make whoopee with an ashtray. We take these actions now because we love and care for our kids. Just do the right thing, please. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Heimbo. Next speaker is Paul Hendrickson, followed by Melissa Curiel, and then V.G. Slate. If anyone else wishes to speak, please put a card into the city clerk at this time.
Good evening, Paul Hendrickson, Palm Springs resident. Dear Mayor, City Council, you're our neighbors, friends, fellow dedicated volunteers. Thank you for taking this moment to hear from me regarding this critical Riverside County tobacco retail permit ordinance. Palm Springs has triple the national average of illegal sales of tobacco to underage youth. Currently, there are basically no consequences to retailers in Palm Springs for doing so, unlike illegal sales of alcohol. We are very much looking forward to our city standing up strong against the tobacco industry and protecting our precious youth from becoming victims of the tobacco industry. Big Tobacco spends approximately $1 million a day recruiting new victims for their deadly products. Studies, unsurprisingly, show approximately 99% of longtime smokers started well before the legal age. Just ask any smoker or former smoker when they started. Doing our best to restrict youth access to tobacco products will greatly help reduce the number of tobacco industry victims, in turn saving lives and prevent profound suffering. This is our chance to show responsible stewardship in a collective voice that says to Big Tobacco, no, we don't support Big Tobacco interests. These are our precious youth and we care about their lives, health, and wellness, unlike Big Tobacco. This Riverside County ordinance finally will bring much-needed consequences to retailers who illegally sell to our precious youth. All aspects of this ordinance are handled at the county level with no cost to the city or use of city personnel. Please, please, please support the ordinance. Palm Springs is one of the few remaining cities in Riverside County which has not yet adopted the Riverside County ordinance, while all our neighboring cities have. Thank you for your strong support and moral compass, showing responsible stewardship of our fair city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hendrickson. Next speaker is Melissa Curiel, then V.J. Slate, and then Joy Brown Meredith.
Good evening. My name is Melissa Curiel, and I am with the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network Project VIVE. We are funded by the state of California to address tobacco-related health disparities in the Hispanic Latino community in Riverside County. We are committed to protecting the health and the well-being of the citizens of Palm Springs through evidence-based policy and legislative solutions designed to eliminate cancer as a major health problem. As such, we are here to provide input about the adoption of the tobacco retail license or permit. Lung cancer is the leading cause of cancer deaths among Hispanic Latino populations in California, and smoking causes 80 to 90% of lung cancer cases. Big Tobacco aggressively discounts flavored cigars and cigarettes in predominantly Hispanic Latino neighborhoods to hook new customers. I'm providing copies of MAP tool from Stanford to show you the relationship between the ethnicity and tobacco retailers in your city. Tobacco companies have a long history of marketing to vulnerable populations and target youth with imagery and by marketing candy and fruit-flavored tobacco. We have long recognized the significance of adolescence as a period during which smoking behaviors are typically developed. Adolescents are still going through critical periods of brain growth and development, and they're especially vulnerable to the toxic effects of nicotine. A study published in the Journal of Pediatrics found that the earlier you are exposed to nicotine, the less likely they will be able to quit smoking. Prohibiting the sale of all flavored tobacco products, including menthol, cigarettes, and prohibiting the sale of tobacco near youth-sensitive locations will while also reducing window advertising are important components of the comprehensive strategy to effectively help reduce tobacco initiation by children. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Curiel. The next speaker is VJ Slate, followed by Joy Brown Meredith. Ms. Meredith will be our last speaker unless someone else puts a card in.
Hi, I'm VJ Slate, and I'm a volunteer with the American Cancer Society's Cancer Action Network, and I'm also the former chairman for the Coalition for Tobacco-Free Communities Serving Riverside County, and I'm here tonight to urge you to adopt the Tobacco Retail Licensing Ordinance. In 1990, I quit smoking myself after a cancer diagnosis, and I've been helping others in their nicotine dependence ever since. Every single person I have helped become smoke-free will tell you that the best way to stop smoking is to never start. Another item that we can all agree on is that none of us think that children should use tobacco, and yet 90% of all people start smoking as a teenager. However, everyone except the tobacco companies think kids shouldn't start. The tobacco companies have been adjudicated as racketeers under the RICO Act, and the ruling judge, Gladys Kessler, said that they have a corporate culture of corruption that is unlikely to change. In that court case, the audacity of the tobacco companies was exposed. I've brought copies for each of you from that case outlining all of the marketing that the tobacco companies do to our youth. The tobacco companies spend billions of dollars each year on marketing activities to encourage young people to try and then continue purchasing tobacco in order to provide the replacement smokers they need to survive. Enforcement at the state and the federal level is inadequate. Regulation of tobacco products cannot keep pace with the alternative tobacco products being introduced into the market. The toll of tobacco on California cannot be minimized. 110,000 high school students in California currently smoke. Over 17% use electronic cigarettes. Each year, 10,900 new kids become daily smokers. 441 kids who are under the age of 18 and are currently living in California will ultimately die prematurely from the addiction they pick up as a teenager. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Slate. The next speaker and our last speaker will be Joy Brown Meredith.
Sorry. Okay, that's what I do, and this is my name. Good evening. I know that you pulled the item off of the agenda, but I really just want to say thank you to Councilman Roberts. I think that there's more work to be done. I think that we could do something awesome with all the different kinds of street furniture that we're looking for. I think that your staff is incredible. It's been just such a pleasure. But I was coming here tonight to ask you if you would pull it off the agenda, and how wonderful that that was done before I even arrived. So thank you very much, and I think we're going to do something great. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Meredith. Any other speakers, City Clerk? Seeing none, we will close the first public comments. Next item, item 1C on the consent calendar. 1D. Coachella Valley Association of Government CVAG Housing First Program Evaluation. That was Councilmember Holstage.
Mr. Mayor?
I'm sorry.
Council reports?
Oh, did I miss that? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I checked it off automatically. City Council Subcommittee and City Manager's comments and reports. This time is set aside for the City Council to provide additional general comments, reports, and announcements. Additionally, this time is set aside for the City Manager to update the City Council on important items initiated by staff or previously requested by the City Council. Councilmember Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Earlier today, the Planning Commission met, and I was the City Council liaison and attended that meeting. Mr. Mayor, you also sat in during one part of the session today. The Planning Commission is going to be bringing forward to us very shortly their recommendations on two critical items. One is golf course conversions. The second has to do with public benefits in planned development districts. They have asked for those items to be a joint session of the Planning Commission and City Council. I think that a joint session to deal with both of those issues would be very appropriate. These are complex issues, and the ability to interact with all of the Planning Commission, I think, would be very helpful as we move forward. So I'm going to ask that we set that for a joint session and ask the city manager at some point to find the date that would work for us to be able to bring everyone together. And then
Thank you.
Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem Roberts.
I had a couple of other items. I'm sorry. Okay. We've been busy lately. Councilmember Holstage and I have had two very good ad hoc meetings with Desert AIDS Project regarding their upcoming affordable housing project, and I'm very pleased to see that we are starting to make progress on developing affordable housing. Last Friday, I was in Sacramento with representatives from the Riverside County Transportation Commission. We met with Undersecretary of Transportation Chad Edison. The purpose of those meetings were to discuss two issues. One was rail to the Coachella Valley. It is a long time coming, but we are still making progress on moving that in the right direction. The second issue, and one that is very near and dear to the hearts of people here in Palm Springs, is gaining greater flexibility for municipalities to invoke speed limits that work in their own cities. Assemblymember Laura Friedman sponsored, and the governor has signed AB 2363, which will set up a statewide task force to study recommendations that hopefully will result in greater flexibility on speed limits and greater opportunities for all municipalities to get to what we are shooting for, zero pedestrian fatalities. And those are my items. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Middleton. Councilmember Holstage.
Yeah, it got screwed up.
Well, I just go by the system. Okay.
I'll be quick. I've got two quick items. So the Cannabis Ad Hoc Committee met specifically for one item, and that was on odor issues related to cannabis growth and production. And apparently we're starting to develop a problem in certain neighborhoods. And so the good news on this is apparently the technology for mitigating odors having to do with cannabis production has jumped dramatically. And we are looking into those measures. We will implement them as quickly as possible. I think even more importantly than that, this will cause the ad hoc committee to re-examine our policy and write new language to require much higher levels of mitigation prior to them even getting their licenses and permits. And you know, we're going to have to go backwards a little for the 6 that are there now, but we're grateful that it's only 6 that we need to deal with. There's not only new technology in terms of mitigating the odors, but there's now great new technology in monitoring the odors where we can actually measure the level of odors that are escaping from a building. So we're on that. We are going to put out a very strong and very specific PR plan to let the neighborhoods now know and the community now know that we're working on that, because that's become a concern. The ad hoc down park subcommittee met, Councilwoman Holstage and I, and we met specifically about the Illuminaire House. The Illuminaire House, for those that aren't familiar with it, is an original Albert Frey house that was built and has lived in different parts of the country, and it currently lives here in Palm Springs in a freight container, and it's looking for a place to be built. And there's a group of very hardworking people who are raising the money to actually build it here someplace, and we're looking at locations for that. Downtown, the new downtown park was one location that was considered, but we're expanding that search, and we'll be taking community input on that as well as it gets closer. And that's what I have, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember Holstage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a few announcements and reports. One, the animal shelter, the Friends of the Animal Shelter, has hired an executive director. Her name is Gabrielle Amster, and she started today. So it's really great news that they've hired a director of operations and now an executive director, and so I think it'll help the city and the animal shelter work closely together, and it's just great to see the support of our animal shelter that continues to grow. It's such an important institution in our city. I went to the CVAG Homelessness Task Force, and that's an agenda item that I'm going to go over the report next. But I was also elected the vice chair of that committee. So that's exciting. I serve with Sabby Jonathan, who's the chair, who's excellent. And we're doing a lot of work. And I think every time I go, it's great to have the leadership that Palm Springs is showing. To be able to bring that and help lead the way is really important. So I'm just really grateful that I get to represent our residents and our city who truly, deeply care about homelessness and really want to take action. So I feel lucky to represent our city on that board. Relatedly, Councilmember Kors and I continue to meet as our ad hoc homelessness subcommittee for the city, and we've been working really, really hard on working with different partners, trying to put a number of different projects together. As the council knows, we just declared a shelter emergency in order to get HEAP funding for a number of different projects that we're working on, and so we're meeting with the county and different agencies to try to put something together. And so right now we're looking at sites for homelessness services or a wellness village of types. So if anyone there in the community knows of sites, that would be good. We're having city looking at different sites. We're talking to different partners who might own land that might be good for that, because I've heard again and again from the whole Coachella Valley and from our residents is that we need a place in the West Valley where people can go. And we have the highest number of homeless people by a lot here in Palm Springs. The Mayor Pro Tem and I met about rainbow crosswalks. Thank you to Marcus and staff for working on that. So we had a good meeting, brainstormed a lot of different creative ways that we could be different from a lot of cities who've already done rainbow crosswalks and really stand out as part of our brand, being like no place else. We want a crosswalk like no place else. And so the Mayor Pro Tem had a lot of creative ideas about that. So that's exciting. And we're trying to put that together with the Indian Canyon two-way conversion. So that's about the timing that we're thinking of, though we met with Ron DeHart from Palm Springs Pride and talked about different creative ways that we could spruce up Arena Street for Palm Springs Pride as well. So those are the things we're looking at. Councilmember Kors and I met with the Sustainability Standing Committee on Waste Reduction. And we talked about a few items that they're working on. That's a great subcommittee, and they're doing a lot of work for the city. And they're also looking at the straw ordinance, the styrofoam potential ordinance, and a lot of our waste that we use here in the city and in the community. So one thing that they did is they created a survey for businesses to fill out about the use. So what type of containers you use for to-go items, what type of straws you use, how feasible it would be for you to can change to different types of sustainable materials and what the city can do to help businesses be more sustainable. So we're sending that out to businesses, so through the Chamber of Commerce and a few other avenues, so please look for that. And if you're a business, please reach out to us if you have comments, because we really want to hear from the businesses about how we can be more sustainable together as a city. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Holsich. Next, Councilmember Coors.
Thank you, Mayor. One follow-up on that is one of the things we learned in the meeting on recycling and with the sustainability folks was that under state law starting January 1st, 2019, there are a lot of new commercial recycling requirements that are going to be a major change for a lot of businesses. The city has been very proactive in sending letters out. But given I know what happens to a lot of that kind of mail that comes to my house, I thought that we needed to sort of amp that up a little more. So we're going to be presenting to the Palm Springs Hospitality Association, the hotel general managers, with someone from Palm Springs Disposal and Jay Verada, our Economic and Community Development Director, to really get out there. Jay's actually working to sort of show them how much they're going to have to recycle by bringing the right size stuff so people have a good sense of what's required. And there's a lot more coming down in the several years ahead that is going to be major and significant. So we're going to just sort of take that on the road. But if there are questions, people can reach out to our Economic and Community Development Office and Sustainability on what they need to do. A couple other things. I don't have much. So as liaison to PS Resorts, we had a meeting last week. And just a couple updates. They're approving, and just so folks understand, there are sort of two pots of money that comes from TOT on half of the TOT on the resort fee that some hotels charge is used to promote tourism, and some of it is determined by the city council, which we've already done, some is determined by the board of PS Resorts. And so they're funding, as they have every year, $25,000 towards Tour de Palm Springs, which brings them up to what they've gotten in the past between the city and PS Resorts. For Pride, they've upped their amount to $15,000. So between the grant we gave and this extra money, that will cover all of Pride's various fees, police, sheriff, all the extra costs of putting on Pride. So this covers all the fees, which is how they got to that number. They also approved $10,000 for the Palm Springs Air Museum, given its impact on tourism. For Palm Springs, and $35,000 for the Palm Springs International Film Festival. And the only other thing I have is, a couple days ago, the governor signed Assembly Bill, I just pulled it up and I forgot the number, 1912, which is the one that creates liability for cities for unfunded future, it looks like it's not passed, but unfunded pension liabilities for JPAs we're part of. So it'd be really helpful to get an analysis of the JPAs we're part of that actually are part of CalPERS, and whether they have any unfunded liabilities and what their plans are, and whether we need to put in provisions in any future agreements in those JPAs about them staying fully funded on their CalPERS obligations. So it doesn't end up, if the JPA goes under for whatever reason, that Palm Springs ends up with a huge liability that we had no idea we were coming and getting. So maybe that can come back with a meeting with the budget subcommittee to look at that. Would be terrific. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Coors. Thank you, Councilmember Coors. Next item is consent calendar. I will entertain a motion to accept the consent calendar without items 1C, without items 1D and 1F, and Councilmember Middleton will be recusing from item 1C. Motion to approve by Mayor Pro Tem Roberts, seconded by Councilmember Holsich. Motion is on the floor.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. First item, item 1D, Coachella Valley Association of Governments CBAG Housing First Program Evaluation. Councilmember Holsich.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So CVAG, the Coachella Valley Association of Governments, hired HARC to do an independent statistical analysis about the success of the Path of Life program, the Housing First program that all the cities are funding together, and the tribes as well are all funding this program. And I did say on the record, I wish we did this data analysis for every type of program that we do here in government, because I just think it's a great idea to really look at the data. There's been some miscommunication about the Path of Life program and the Housing First model, because they're investing a lot of money into housing people, getting people housing first, and providing services as well, and then keeping people in homes. So initially they weren't doing outreach, and so that was some of the pushback from the community leaders, that they weren't connecting with them. And so CVAG, you may remember, I recently said that we changed the agreement to allow them to do outreach. But this is, I attached it here, thank you to staff, in our minutes so that we can see, you can read that full report for anyone who has questions about Path of Life. So overall, Path of Life served 400 clients in the Coachella Valley within this period of time, which is a year. And they have really, really good success rates. So about 81% of the 242 people who exited the program so far in the first year, there's still a number of the rest of the people who are still in the program, who are still in that housing, because it's a lot of permanent supportive housing. But out of the 242 people, 81% exited to a permanent destination, like permanent housing. Most, 89%, successfully completed the program. And this, I think, is the most exciting part. The monthly income of those who exited more than doubled, from, on an average, $629 a month, which, as we know, is usually not enough even for rent, to $1,400 a month, which is huge. And they compared as well in the report, you'll see they compared those statistics to Roy's. So sometimes we hear from the community who says, we want a shelter model like Roy's back, which we do need shelter models. But in comparison to Roy's itself, you can see on page 4 of the study in the executive report, the majority of Roy's clients, only 2% of Roy's clients exited to permanent destinations, compared with more than 80% for this Housing First model. And people in Roy's, there wasn't a huge increase in their income as well. And so overall, the CVAG committee was really, really happy with these results and the data. They asked any cities who want, I know we just had Path of Life come and report, but HARC said, the people who did the statistical analysis said that they're happy to come to any city and report on these statistics and give and answer any questions. So I think it's really exciting. This is just the first year that we funded this program, and it really has been a huge success. And they've housed and then kept hundreds of people permanently housed. And so it's really, really exciting to watch the results. So I just wanted to share that with council and for anyone in the community who wants to read it as well. Does anyone have any questions about that?
I do, thank you. We use acronyms a lot because we have to, but I think it might help when we're reporting out to understand terms like HARC and HEAP and kind of fill the community in on what those actually mean.
It's in the report. I didn't say it because I can't say HARC off the top of my head. Health Assessment and Research for Communities. They're an independent organization that does statistical health analysis and data research. That's what HARC is. So it's in the report.
And HEAP was brought up earlier, which is obviously what it is, but I thought they don't know.
You're going to grill me. I try really hard not to say acronyms, so I appreciate it. We shouldn't use acronyms. HEAP is, I don't know, it's homeless.
What is it basically?
Is Jay know? I bet Jay knows. Homeless funding that.
Thank you.
Homeless emergency aid program.
So for the community's sake, this is a funding program that we apply to, correct?
Right. Yes, the state,
Okay.
I think this is the
state
big money
fund?
the state funded this year, and Riverside County will get a chunk of it, and we can apply through Riverside County.
When we were in Sacramento, we were sniffing around for these dollars just for this purpose. So this is really exciting that our applications are in and we're following up with that. That's great news.
So HEAP is separate. That's what we declared a shelter emergency in order to get the HEAP funding, which is just state funding for homelessness, and so that's separate than the CVAG funding, which we use out of our general fund to support CVAG's Path of Life Housing First program. But yes, thank you.
Any other discussion before we go to a vote? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion to approve item 1D. Motion approved by Councilmember Holstage, seconded by Councilmember Middleton. Motion is on the floor.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Next item 1F, which is approval of the minutes. Councilmember Holstage.
Thank you. I just had a quick edit on page 10. So it's the excluded consent calendar, item O, the agreement with Tesla. It's about my recusal. So it says Councilmember Holstage announced her recusal due to a financial conflict of interest. I actually don't believe I had a conflict of interest, but a potential financial conflict of interest. And then the vote as well should be 4-0 with me abstaining or recusing. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to approve? Motion approved made by Mayor Pro Tem Roberts, seconded by Councilmember Kors. Motion is on the floor.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Now we move into public hearings. Item 2A, J5 Infrastructure on behalf of AT&T Mobility for a conditional use permit to install a wireless communications facility consisting of 12 8-foot-tall panel antennas on the roof of an existing warehouse building located at 770 South Gene Autry Trail, Zone M1, Section 20. Staff report, please.
Mr. Mayor and members of council, this is a request to locate cell tower antennas on the top of an existing building located at the northeast corner of South Gene Autry and Sunny Dunes. If I could have the PowerPoint, please. Thank you. The application has been reviewed by the Planning Commission and actually came back to the Planning Commission several times. One of the concerns of the Planning Commission with the request is that the antennas will be located in screened enclosures on top of the building, and there was concern about the design of the enclosures and the visibility of the enclosures. The Planning Commission reviewed these again on September the 12th and recommended approval of the conditional use permit subject to conditions. The applicant has accommodated most of those provisions within the drawings that you have in your attached packet. In terms of the locations of the antennas, they'll be within 3 enclosures mounted on the roof of the building. I've circled them there in red, which is shown on your screens. So one enclosure will be on the north end of the building, one on the east, and then one on the south. The principal or primary facade of the building is facing Gene Autry Trail, so none of the enclosures will be on the principal facade facing Gene Autry. The antennas are 8 feet tall, and the enclosure is also 8 feet tall, and so that way the antennas will be fully screened by the enclosures. Here you have an image. The principal image here on the screen shows the enclosure. Again, the Planning Commission went through several iterations of the design of these enclosures, and ultimately what you see is the recommendation of the Planning Commission relative to the design and the coloring of those enclosures that will be there on top of the building. This is the second view showing the southernmost enclosure and also the one on the east facade, and then again the southernmost enclosure facing Sunny Dunes. There will also be an equipment enclosure located at the northeast corner of the site, which will be screened and will have the transformer and other equipment for the cell towers. The proposed application conforms to our conditions for conditional use permits based on the modifications that have been made to the enclosures at the recommendation of the Planning Commission. Staff also recommends approval of the request. We'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about this particular application.
Do we have any questions of staff before we open the public hearing? Okay, do we have is the applicant here to speak?
I believe we have a member of the applicant team here if they would like to come forward.
Okay, therefore we will open the floor for public comment. The applicant has up to 5 minutes to present their case, and if requested, will have 2 minutes available at the end of rebuttal. Members of the public will then be invited to speak on this public hearing item for up to 2 minutes.
Good evening, council members, mayor, and mayor pro tem. My name is Melissa Francisco, and I'm here representing AT&T. I'm here to answer any questions you have. I feel the planning department did a wonderful job on the presentation.
Thank you.
No questions?
Councilmember Middleton?
I have one. The enclosures around the antennas, do they have any impact on the performance of the antennas?
Very minimal.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And now we will do we have any, let me go to my other panel here. Do we have anyone who wishes to speak on this? I don't see anyone.
No public comment?
Okay, seeing none, we will close. I assume you don't want any rebuttal. So we will close the public comments, discussion. Okay, I don't have that on the screen here. Here we go. We have a motion to approve by Mayor Pro Tem Roberts, seconded by Councilmember Middleton. Motion is on the floor.
Motion passes 5-0.
I think that may be the fastest public hearing we ever did. Okay. Next item is legislative, item 3A, introduction of an ordinance of the City of Palm Springs, California, adding Chapter 6.11 of the Palm Springs Municipal Code relating to tobacco retailer permits. Staff report, please.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, the concept of a tobacco retailer permit is not new in Riverside County. The county's been at this for some time, as is memorialized in the staff report for you. It's an evolved system that the county has refined, and it is in operation actively in many jurisdictions, again, as per the staff report. The county's ordinance is enclosed, and some additional significant information with respect to the impact in certain Riverside County cities is provided for your consideration. There are dramatic declines in the youth sales rate with respect to tobacco products that are realized and have been realized throughout the county as a result of this program. There's not a lot of actual legislation before you because we are simply adopting a county program. The city does not have any authority or responsibility with respect to enforcement. The county is driving this bus, and as a practical matter, it seems to work quite well. I want to thank Councilmember Coors for bringing this to us. And before I ask him if he has comments, I'll just note that the enforcement, the interdiction is aggressive. There are stings, there are sort of undercover purchases that are inherent to the enforcement mechanism that the county's been utilizing. And the penalties do escalate with respect to repeat offenders, and permits are revoked. So retailers should be on notice that if they're selling to minors, that's going to end, and it's going to end immediately with the city's adoption of this effective county program. Councilmember Coors, anything that you'd like to add?
No, I think I covered it. It actually was Councilmember Holstage and I who are the ad hoc, no problem. So I want to acknowledge that. Thank the people who came and spoke. Paul and Bob have really stayed on top of us to get this on the agenda. So thank you, Eddie, for getting this done. No, I think you covered it. There's no cost to the city. It's a program the county operates. We just need to give them permission to do it. And it's been very effective in the places they've done it. So thank you.
Councilmember Middleton. I'll push it again, Lisa. There you go.
There we go. On page 2, there's notation that after consultation with the tribe that both allotted land trusts and tribal land trusts will be exempted from this ordinance. Now, I am familiar with tribal trust lands being exempted from these types of ordinances. Are we breaking any new ground with exempting allotted land trusts?
No, as a matter of fact, it's consistent with our recently renewed and restated land use agreement with the tribe. As you know, and as the council has directed for a long time, we have a very close partnership with the tribe. I thoroughly discussed this matter with my counterpart, and this was the result. So, no, we're not breaking new ground or setting new precedent in this respect.
Do we have any information as to how many tobacco retailers are located in our city on allotted land trust and tribal land trust land so as to mitigate any confusion that might exist in the public when someone's accessing a tobacco retailer that this ordinance simply cannot cover.
Yes, and that's an important point, so I'll underscore the significance of your comment, and then I'll simply answer no. The jurisdictional element here is really important. The tribe is a sovereign nation, and unless they assign us as their agent with respect to some of these types of programs, as a practical matter, it just doesn't work. We are going to enforce this program every place that we can. The county will. And as a practical matter, I don't have an answer for you with respect to the numbers of tobacco retailers. We can certainly bring that back. If that's a matter of concern, I can get that data for you, I suspect, through consultation with the tribe and our staff.
I think it would be helpful for us to be aware and for the public to be aware of the tobacco retailers that we do not cover. I say that cognizant that may incentivize some individuals to go to those places that are not covered.
You want numbers or you want locations or both?
Locations will give us the numbers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Middleton. Councilmember Holstage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That was my question as well, so I'm glad that you raised it, because that was my sense, is that a lot of these facilities are in our downtown and are on tribal land, so I appreciate Councilmember Middleton raising that. I also had the same questions. That was my only question. I did want to thank the people who are here who've been advocating for this. This is here on the agenda because you emailed us and reached out to us and met with us a number of times. So thank you for advocating, and you know, we're here if the community wants ordinances like this to look at this and implement them. So really it's thanks to you and not our subcommittee.
Okay, we have a motion to approve made by Mayor Pro Tem Roberts, seconded by Councilmember Coors. Motion is on the floor.
Motion passes 5-0.
Next, unfinished business. Item 4A, Measure J Capital Fund Fiscal Year 2018-19 Budget Appropriations. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. What's before you is the Measure J Capital Fund for the current fiscal year. As you will recall, when we approved the city budget, council set aside, in essence, a pot of money to be allocated at a later date because there was a lot of discussion of priorities and what were staff's priorities, what was Measure J's recommendations. What this is here this evening is not necessarily for you to give us final direction. Marcus Fuller, the Assistant City Manager, and I, we wanted to, in essence, begin the discussion again so you can start thinking about what our priorities are. And as we put this together, what we realize is it's a very sort of complicated set of facts and figures and priorities, and certainly there's a lot of need and not enough resources. That being said, as we give this more thought, Mayor, I think what might be a better process, and this is what I would ask, is Mayor, if you could appoint for lack of a better term, but it would be an ad hoc subcommittee for capital improvements. Yeah, where in essence we're able to drill down on several of these priorities that we're recommending. Now, staff is recommending these priorities based on safety, and that's where you see they're heavily weighted. Like, for example, we know we need new computer-aided dispatch in the police department, but there's also other infrastructure things related to safety. That doesn't take into account the priorities we have in other facilities, such as parks and the recreation facilities. So that being said, I think a subcommittee might be able to help us go through this to come back to council ultimately with a more comprehensive, detailed set of recommendations that include some of the other things beyond just the health and safety. So that being said, Mayor, that's a long way of saying we're certainly open for discussion, any direction you want to give us now. But for the most part, what we would like is this ad hoc subcommittee to help us prioritize these things based on need and come back to council within the next 30 days and finalize this discussion.
Okay, since I worked on Measure J for 3 years, I'd be happy to work on this. Anybody else like to work on it?
I'll be happy to do it.
Everybody okay with Mayor Pro Tem and I working on this?
I was going to ask as well, just because I've advocated for a capital improvement program and to do this comprehensively. I mean, I know you're on Measure J, so that's fine with me, but this is really important to me, especially when we're talking about our parks. And as the Parks and Rec liaison, I think it's really important to talk about that. So I would like to serve on it as well. Thank
Okay,
you.
it'd be myself and Councilmember Holsich then.
If I could, I also think that we need to have involvement from the Measure J Commission as a part of working with this and ask them to identify someone to.
Yeah. What we'll do is we'll ask for them, at least the liaison or subcommittee, to join this subcommittee.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Coors?
And thank you to the mayor and Councilmember Holstage for volunteering. Just as I look at the list and some sort of the broader list of things, I think it would be helpful, at least for one of your meetings, to have the city attorney there, because I want to also look at liability issues, right? Safety bollards, if we don't do them, ADA repairs. There are a number of things that may not be as high a priority in some sense, but if there's a big liability problem, we might want the subcommittee to be thinking of that as well. And that was all. Thank you.
That's a really good point. So if we could get that recommendation before we meet and review it, and then we'll have more information. I also wanted just more information about each of these projects, what they are, what they entail, sort of some description about each one, and the necessity would be really helpful for me to review as well.
Yeah, and if I could add, Dr. Reddy, like Councilmember Holstage said, we need some details on some of these, like I mean, I know the one for the police department is very important, but it's $2.2 million, and so we really need some details on that one. And also, I know this is not a huge ticket item, but for Mayor Pro Tem and I are on the ad hoc subcommittee for the holiday decorations. And our director of facilities has been telling us for 3 years that she's putting them up with duct tape, and they're falling apart, and they're not going to last much longer. So could you also have facilities give us an update on?
Well, Mayor, if I could, and that is an important issue. The holdup has been, as you can appreciate, this is an artistic, discretionary choice. And what's really helpful is if we had City Council helping us make the choice of what to purchase in terms of the types of decorations. We've tried this a few times in the past, and we didn't have unanimous agreement. So I think I'm going to need at least a liaison to help with that discussion.
You have an ad hoc committee, which is still Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem and I, which is good. I looked today until December 31st.
Oh, great then. Okay.
So, Mayor Pro Tem, can we get together on this?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, we've had money budgeted for this several times. So, and it's in the budget recommendation. So you could find the resources within this budget, and then it could be a recommendation of the subcommittee.
Push your button. Push.
You know, we should probably have Joy Brown Meredith in on that as well. You know, just, you know, we want to get some downtown input as well, you know, and obviously we'll get a lot of community input, but Joy's good in gathering the merchants and.
Right, we'll include Main Street in there.
Yeah, I want it to go, I want it to be in front of them as well.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, thank you. The next, I'm sorry? We don't need a motion. No, we don't need a motion because we're continuing this. Okay. Next item under new business, item 5A. We're going so fast, I'm getting lost here. Item 5A, approve amendment number 1 to the professional services agreement number A7071 in the amount of $82,500 with Rios Clemente Hell Studios. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As noted in the staff report, there's been a lot of progress made with the design of the new downtown park. As a reminder, this council established a formal subcommittee represented by Mayor Pro Tem Roberts and Councilmember Holstage, as well as members of various commissions. And that committee has had several meetings where we reviewed the design development drawings for the downtown park. So essentially, the downtown park design has been approved by this committee, subject to resolving, I think, 2 issues, one relating to shade structures, which I think we've resolved that or have direction to move forward on that. And the last thing being the substation for the police department. And so that's what we're bringing you tonight, is a consideration of slightly enlarging the scope and size of the police substation. The original concept was basically a single room shown here near the restrooms. The idea was to provide, basically, to replace the space they have on Indian Canyon Drive. So the scope of the contract with Rios Clemente House Studios was essentially a single space room and a restroom for the police department. And that was basically a conceptual floor plan. In reviewing what the police department requires long range for the downtown and that side, in that area of Palm Springs, they evaluated their space needs and determined that actually they need a little more space and to be a little more independent and fully functioning, separate from the police station down here by City Hall. What's before you now is a slightly enlarged floor plan with additional space needs that they've identified, with some storage of equipment located in the adjacent garage. And that's a enlarged floor plan of what that looks like. So this is beyond the scope of what was in the original design contract with Rios Clemente Hale. It involves doing interior fit out, some offices, additional storage and other areas that need to be fully designed in an effort to make sure we move forward and get the design completed, because they've commenced on the actual construction drawings and are scheduled to have that completed by the end of the year or shortly thereafter. We would need to have council consider an amendment to their contract to include the additional architectural and design services related to this work. I know the police chief is here, and he's been involved with this discussion and can offer some insight into the background for the need for this additional space. But we would recommend your consideration of the item so we can get the construction drawings completed and move into bidding this in the spring of next year. With that, Mr. Mayor, I'll turn it to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Roberts.
Thank you, Mayor. So Councilwoman Holstage and I obviously met for the ad hoc committee on this issue for the downtown park. And the police department now, I know, is this the, I guess this is the final iteration, Marcus? This is, I guess, a pared down version, right? A reduced size. Okay, so this is excellent. Mr. Fuller, you and I had exchanged emails because I was a little taken back by what Rios Clemente Hale was charging for their upcharge, and you were going to look into that. And I wondered if you had either been able to negotiate something different or find out why this number was so high, because it seemed like a relatively minor adjustment to the plan in terms of their workload, and $85,000 seemed like a lot to me.
I did, and I did prevail and have them reduce their fee somewhat, but that was before I realized that they were excluding the interior fit out, essentially all of the design and architectural to identify the interior finishes and build out of the space. And so most of this is a sub-consultant work, so they have MEP work, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, that wasn't envisioned in the original space. So a lot of this cost is coming from their sub-consultants, and it legitimately wasn't as included in their scope. So it ended up going up in price after they reduced it because of the need to do the interior architectural drawings for the space.
So again, I'm still struggling with this because this space was already designed. With respect to engineering, it couldn't be that different. and I'm not beating you up about this, I'm still struggling with why this has become so expensive when all we've really done is adjusted the size of an existing room. And yeah, I understand that they needed to do an interior layout, which would take a first-year draftsman about an hour to do. So I'm a little surprised still. What's your take on this? Did you feel after you spoke with them that these dollars were warranted?
You know, to be honest with you, it's hard for me to judge that because I rely on them as professionals to tell me what it takes to get these projects done. I can't, I don't have a way to gauge that they need 100 hours versus 200 hours when they come up with their fee estimate. I mean, this is a little bit different than what was the original scope because they do have to do a full set of building plans for what is now a space with multiple rooms. So there is a lot of architecture involved in this, even though we're only talking about a 1,400 square foot building.
But if this was a CAD drawing, and it was, what they really were doing was just adjusting an existing space, correct?
Well, but like I said, it involves multiple rooms, so it's a lot more detail and a lot more information in the construction drawings for the building itself. The building's a little bit larger, but I think it's the interior of the building that's dictating the additional scope of work, the effort that's required in order to have construction drawings to build it.
Okay, I just want to say for the record, I want to have a talk with them. I'm a little worried about these costs. As you know, I expected the costs of the park to rise. There's just, that happens. And as we figure out our needs and we adjust our program, and in this case, you know, we're adding an important city service. We're basically adding another police station downtown that we didn't plan on. So I understand that, and we need it. But, you know, maybe it would help if they explained a little bit more clearly to us so that we can explain to the community why these prices are so high.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? Councilmember Holstage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm also having a hard time with the cost and the scope of this project, just increasing this. So what has happened, and we definitely want to include and hear from our police department, and I think we want to talk about the strategy of having our police substation downtown. In the designer, in their defense, we did ask them, they were at 100% design completion with a 700 square foot police substation, and then we came actually after the 100% design, and in consultation with the police department, the need is now at 1,400 square feet, which is a big increase to where we were. I have this really fun job of helping guide and design a park while I'm coming into the middle of it. So, you know, I see their position where now we're asking for a building that's now double in size. That's a huge increase in the scope of the work. I'll defer to you about what a draftsman can do in an hour. But, you know, there is a concern. I have a concern about, and this is an expensive place to obviously support building the police substation there. It is an expensive place, in my opinion, being on the subcommittee to increase the size, because you can see at the bottom of the design there, the wall for the restrooms and the police substation. You can see. Thank you. So you can see that kind of is the same wall that goes into the waterfall. So for my council members who aren't on the subcommittee with us, that's what we were talking about, is having this beautiful sort of rock wall that's mimics Tahquitz Canyons and the rocks that we have, the natural rocks. And so I'm concerned about the costs increasing for this substation as well, having a doubly large footprint. And so I think that's just a conversation for us to have about our plan and, you know, our long-term plan for having, obviously we need lots of police officers downtown. They need a good station. They need a good substation there. But I am worried about this is just to increase the design, to redo the design. So what are the costs going to be for increasing that footprint for the park overall? And we are getting at a point where the costs cost of the park is increasing. It's more expensive to build things now, so.
And we need to have that discussion with you, Dr. Reddy, with respect to budget. We've jumped up quite a bit, and I don't know where we are with that. I know we had allocated a certain amount of funds, and you had also gone and found some additional funds, but is that a discussion we need to be having as well, sooner than later?
Well, as you know, we talked about it in the subcommittee, and this obviously is going to take us down that path that the ultimate park cost is going to increase. Marcus, what was, could you refresh our memory, what was the discussion of the additional at this level?
So with this expanded police substation, the latest construction estimate was 6.5 million. I'm thinking that you're going to have to expect construction bids 20% over that, just with the state of the economy. So that's 7.5 million.
But the 6.5, that's with this expanded station, correct?
That's correct.
And prior to that, it was?
5.4.
So it's a substantial increase in price. So as long as that's tracking, we just need to know when we get to a point where we're hitting a wall financially on it. I mean, frankly, in the big scheme of things, it still sounds reasonable for what we're getting. We're getting a new police station and we're getting a new park for, $7.2 million. And that's pretty good if we can keep it there.
Finished?
That was a comment.
Are you finished?
Yeah.
Okay, Councilmember Middleton?
I agree with everything I've heard, and it sounds to me like we're moving towards tabling this item for this evening and asking the subcommittee to work with Marcus and Rios Clemente before coming back for approval.
Or would you be willing to say up to 82.5, because they don't have to spend the entire thing?
Yeah, and I don't know that we need to do that, Christy. I don't know whether we need to table it unless you do. We can move forward. I do want to have a discussion with them about money and increased costs, kind of let them know that we're kind of hitting the wall now. But I'm ready to move forward with this if my colleagues agree.
We have a beautiful timeline here on page 6, and even this is putting us 1 month, we'll see, probably longer, behind our timeline. We've been really clear with everyone that we want to stick to the timeline. I do think it's a conversation which is quite large of what size substation can we afford there, and what do we want. I haven't, unfortunately, had the opportunity to talk to the police chief and the police department myself, so I haven't been able to make that, determination for it, but I am nervous just in the increasing costs and seeing here that we still need additional money to pay for this.
Oh, there's no question of it. But I don't think we need to table this expenditure, the $85,000. From what I'm hearing, this is the revised plan that came from the police department. Chief, do you have anything to add to this, or are we good with this? Can we get him a mic?
No, I know.
There you go, Chief.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Yes, this has been in consulting with the police department and my staff, and the reality is this event space is going to draw a significant crowd. With ongoing events, if there's ever an opportunity to get what we need now, it's probably now. Expanding in the future is probably not likely after it's built out. And I can discuss two key things: is visibility of officers, especially with an event space downtown, the underground parking, and the potential of drinking in cars prior to going to an event, to have the availability of officers to respond immediately. Should there be large fights or protests, we store riot gear. We operate out of that facility and not respond from the station. Responding in a timely manner is critical. One example is the Pulse nightclub in Florida. I've attended an executive debrief on that incident, and that suspect actually drove up and down their entertainment district. They have 80 officers on overtime visible on every corner. He chose not to attack there. He chose the Pulse nightclub because of the lack of visibility on officers. One person killed 49, 50 people. So the availability for officers to respond to that event space immediately is critical. And that's what we took in consideration in regards to having the available space to not only respond immediately, but also to address crime when it does occur. For example, the recent incident that occurred within the past month where one subject went downtown with a fogger of bear spray, affected 9 to 10 people. This gives us the ability to draw all those victims in an isolated location and address that overall crime and not be spaced out in dealing with any level of crime.
Thank you, Chief. So the only question left in my head is, we're there for you in terms of what you want. You think that this size, this layout will work for you for all the things you just described?
I do, and especially if you're taking in consideration of having a supermarket downtown and residential living downtown. It changes the game for us in regards to staffing around the clock to be available for people that are literally living in our downtown district.
If we, Chief, if we felt that, I know we talked about this in committee, if we felt that you needed some expansion, we could always move into the garage for that at some point, for storage and other things, correct?
Absolutely.
So we do have the ability to expand once all those new businesses are open, or we start to find that we're doing very large events there and you need more down there.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
Can I
Councilmember
ask a
Holstage?
follow-up question? Do you know, and you might not know, maybe someone on staff does, but because that's my concern, is the ability to really expand this type of substation that's going to be in a rock wall and just isn't, I mean, it'd be nice to build you a huge facility downtown that's not, you know, in this rock wall, and which is a beautiful design, but doesn't seem good for expanding later for a full downtown station. So is it your sense that there is a good deal of room to expand into the future in that garage?
Yes, and especially when it comes to the storage of our equipment, whether it be riot gear, our police bicycles, our segways, or any equipment, we can expand into that garage for those related items.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Chief.
Any other discussion?
Actually, if we could, that was part of what from committee what was envisioned, as you can see here. Marcus, can you explain that storage is in the garage?
Right, so one of the final changes to shrink the size of the substation was to move some of the storage areas into the garage. So you can see they're going to build some storage units, essentially taking up a few spaces in the adjacent garage.
And that's what allowed them to reduce the footprint of the police station from the prior iteration. So it is a little bit reduced, Christy, but it's still larger than it was.
That came up in our subcommittee as an option for them, and I'm glad to see they took it. I know, they need bikes and other equipment, and I guess what I was more asking is if we could expand directly behind the station, should we need it for even more offices? And it looks like we still have plenty of room to do that if we need to.
You do, and you not that you'd want to, but you could expand to the east further in that area, that northeast corner of the park, if that was really an urgent matter. But there's also...
Well, we do have land there, don't we?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Middleton?
Yes, I'm still concerned about the $82,500 for these costs, but I clearly defer to the chief, Marcus, and the subcommittee in resolving it.
Okay, thank you. Do we have I can't see the screen. Do we have a motion to approve? Okay, there it is. Okay, motion to approve made by Councilmember Corr, seconded by Councilmember Holstage. Motion is on the floor.
Motion passes 5-0.
Next item, item B, review of preliminary landscape plan for the 14th and 15th fairways of the Tahquitz Creek Legends Golf Course. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This item is to allow you to consider a preliminary landscape plan along the golf course. As you know, this follows up on council direction given earlier this year when you authorized us to move forward to remove some trees along the golf course. I've included in your staff report some recent photos which show the area in question. The area has been returfed by Century Golf, and so at this point, the idea would be to replicate the landscaping that's on the west side of the fairways with similar landscape treatment, which is really simple. It's palm trees and pine trees. And so the landscape plan that's noted in your, included in your staff report basically replicates that landscape treatment. We estimate the cost of this would be under $100,000, and we would request your direction tonight. If it's your direction that this landscape plan meets your approval, then we can coordinate with Century Golf to essentially do their own bidding like they did the tree removals, and then coordinate with us, and then they could coordinate that work themselves. So with that, we welcome your comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Middleton.
Thank you. I was one of those who originally thought that what was on the west side of the fairway should be replicated on the east side of the fairway. So I'm very pleased with what I'm seeing here in your plans. Can you tell me, has there been any outreach to either the Mountain Shadows or the Lawrence Crosley neighborhoods with regard to these preliminary plans?
There has not. We wanted to seek your direction tonight, and then, of course, we can coordinate with both of those groups.
Okay. You've identified this as preliminary, so I'm assuming from that there is still some flexibility if on discussion with the two neighborhoods you find that there are things that could be adjusted or should be adjusted to work with the neighborhoods. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm very supportive of this, but I do believe that we should reach out to both the Lawrence Crosley and Mountain Shadows neighbors to hold meetings with them and review these plans and move forward as quickly as we can.
Thank you, Councilor Middleton. Mayor Pro Tem Roberts.
Councilwoman Middleton made my comments for me. I'm good.
Thank you. I had one question. Marcus, you have an estimate of the timeline of when this could be accomplished? And is there any seasonal weather requirements of when you can do this?
The idea was to get it done in the fall, so I'll have some conversations with Century Golf starting tomorrow to find out a timeline for their landscaper. But I would imagine that they could get this done within a month or two at the latest.
Right, I'm sure sooner the better.
The mayor and I are, I guess, ad hoc on this. My question to you is, in reaching out to the neighborhoods, do we want Century Golf to do that? Do you want to do another little public forum for the neighborhoods? How would you like to move forward on this? Because it seems to me the last piece of this is just getting neighborhood input.
Right. We can coordinate with the neighborhoods through Denise Goolsby, through the Office of Neighborhood Involvement, and basically solicit their comments.
Okay, and the ad hoc still.
We could do the meeting there on site, really.
Whatever Denise thinks, the mayor and I are ready to meet or do whatever's needed to move this forward.
We've come a long way on this.
Thanks, Marcus.
Councilmember Holstage?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to thank our staff and the subcommittee for working so hard on this. And I actually think we've gotten a lot of community feedback about the landscape. I keep a folder in my email of every single topic, and this one, the tamarisk trees, definitely has the most. And I heard a lot of feedback that people wanted similar or the same landscaping on each side. So I'm glad you're doing that community outreach. I do think we've heard a lot about what people wanted, and one thing they wanted is to do this quickly. So I think as quickly as we can get this would be great for the community. And I just have a question, Marcus. In the landscape plan, because I remember when I walked the tamarisk trees, and I did it with Century Golf, and they told us, actually the mayor and I did that, and they told us that people swing more, the balls go more to that side. So did the landscape architect look at that about needing possibly more protection on that side than is on the other side for errant golf balls?
I don't believe he did, and I can have that conversation with him and see if he suggests in a certain area, having some taller, more
It might
trees.
be good when you loop in Century Golf, just to have that conversation, because I learned, as a non-golfer, learned a lot about where the balls might go. So I think that would be good feedback to get, as well as the community feedback.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to very specifically respond to the issue of errant golf balls. So when we met on both occasions with the neighborhood, it was made very clear to them by staff and the mayor and myself that they would now lose the protection that they once had, that those trees essentially were planted for that reason. And that short of doing a wall or a screen or a net, they were now going to be subjected to some golf balls coming in. And if we are to do what we promised we would do, which is kind of replicate the landscape on the east side that's on the west side, that provides very, very little protection. So I just wanted to restate that, because unless we go to a very thick planting or a wall, we don't want to send any false messages that there's any protection there. It's the price you pay for living on a beautiful golf course, essentially, is that you're susceptible to getting a ball or 2 or 4 or 100 in your yard. I have friends who live on golf balls and have buckets of balls that they collect. But I think we made it very clear to the neighborhood that this was a peril that was going to come with the removal of those trees. And of course, the neighborhood on the other side that lives with the dramatically reduced landscape, that was one of their comments, was be careful what you wish for.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that for the record. I think it's important,
just
because I
for the
know you've
record.
talked to a lot of community members, and that was a big part of the conversation. Still, in the opportunity that we have to design and put some trees there, we should engage with golf experts about where that landscaping should be, because they might have some feedback.
And I also recall when we did that tour, the people giving us the tour were very much in favor of leaving the tamarisk trees there. So they also had an interest in keeping them there. So, okay, do you have any discussion? Do we have a motion to approve? Motion approved made by Councilmember Middleton, seconded by Councilmember Holsters. Motion is on the floor.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Next item, item 5D, Memorandum of Understanding with the Management Association of Palm Springs. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. As you know, we're currently negotiating with all 6 bargaining units of our employee associations. Our personnel director, Perry Madison, along with our labor attorney, are doing the negotiations. What's before you this evening is the first agreement that we have reached, and this is with the Management Association. In the Management Association, I would just note, they are not the department heads. It's the level of professional employees below the department head level. And so what's before you this evening is what we believe is a fair recommendation. The contract, basically, it's a 3-year agreement that gives salary increases of 2.5% per year, and those amounts roughly are about $250,000, roughly thereabouts in each of the years. That being said, we're happy to answer any questions, and the Personnel Director is here as well if you have any questions directed at him. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Questions? None? Okay, do we have a motion to approve? Motion approves made by Mayor Pro Tem's trying to.
It's not.
Okay, motion is made by Councilmember Corr, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Roberts.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Next item, item 5E, discussion of upcoming meeting schedule. Staff report, please.
Mayor and members of council, last meeting you had asked us to actually agendize this as a discussion item of upcoming meetings. So in your yellow folders, we have an updated tentative meeting schedule, and what we did to update it, you will see in bold. Met with staff, and we went through these one by one and came up with what we thought would be a reasonable time frame. So for your discussion purposes this evening, we're recommending the time frames for some of these items. Some you will see do not have a time frame next to them, and we could use a little direction from you on those in terms of priority, but this is a place to start for the discussion, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I remember a few weeks ago, Councilmember Holstage brought up the question of the scooters, Lime and Bird, or whatever they're called, and the staff was going to do some research on this, see what other cities have been doing on those scooters. So could we try to agendize that sometime in the relatively near future?
Have we been approached yet?
We have not. We have not been approached by either of the companies, I believe, but Lyman and Bird are the large ones. But we've not been approached by either yet at this point.
Maybe we should be proactive in that. I'm seeing, in my travels, I've seen a lot of it, and I spoke to some other cities as well. There's very mixed results with these scooters, and apparently some cities wish they hadn't done it. And I think that maybe we should have a bigger community discussion on this, because there's the potential for bikes, Lime. There's so many on these shared little transportation choices. So
and Mayor Pro Tem Roberts, I would just note that I just was at the annual City Managers Conference in a city that had these, and it was quite amusing to see 3,000 city managers. That was their mode of transportation around the city on scooters. I would just note that it was an eye-opening experience, and it was interesting.
Gee, Doc, who provided those?
And actually, it was all the companies were there. So I actually got a firsthand experience of sort of the good and the bad, and how that city deals with it. So there's good models out there and ordinances of the regulations. So I think there's certainly a balance that we can find.
Yeah, we need to be good at it, whatever we do.
Yeah, because what I'm recommending is like a council discussion based on a staff report, and then we can decide whether we want to move forward with an actual ordinance. The other item I wanted to bring up was we had some discussion some time ago. In fact, it was in the paper. We had a discussion on pickleball courts. How are we doing on getting that coming from the Parks and Recs with some recommendations on what to do with those?
And Mayor, that dovetails nicely into the whole capital project because of the expense there. So two things I would recommend. One, we need to check back in with the Parks and Recreation Commission to see what their recommendation is, and then also swing into the discussion on the capital improvements. So the combination of those two, I think we'd be able to come back to council then with what that recommendation would be.
Okay, another item, Mayor Pro Tem, I should have asked you about this before, and I forgot to. I think could we schedule a council discussion on the recommendations on the Plaza Theater, because we haven't given those results to the council yet, and then Mayor Pro Tem and I can work on trying to set up a town hall meeting to present that to the public. But we need to have a discussion with the council first.
I second that request, and just for the benefit of the council, we thought that, well, we know that we're going to need community help with this one. This is going to be a project that will only work if the community holds hands for this. So we'll bring what we have found, which is pretty eye-opening through the analysis that we've done, but we want to do a full-fledged public forum, at least the mayor and I do, on this one issue to see what we can do about it. But we want to give you a heads up on that.
Yes, we need a discussion on that, and then we have the materials. We can make copies and present and give them to the council for that. Next item, Councilmember Holstage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that we had, Councilmember Middleton and I had raised the issue of scooters. I do think actually, though, we're a bit behind. We're about 7 years at least behind in a lot of other cities because we don't even have shared bikes. So though it is a hot button topic, and I follow it quite closely because my brother-in-law lives in Santa Monica and uses Bird, and my friends in San Francisco. But I do think, as it's coming to a lot of cities, they haven't come to Palm Springs, at least for 10 years, a lot of these companies. But we should know I would like to know information about what they're doing, because my understanding is that they're not getting permission from cities when they start to operate, and they're just sort of starting. It's like this Airbnb, Uber and Lyft kind of model of just starting up. So that would be helpful to have information about what we can do. I don't know what type of outreach we want, what our community wants. I've gotten some emails about it, but I do think it's important to have a discussion item on that.
This is also an issue we should reach out to Main Street on.
Yeah, that's a good idea. My main question that I always raise is just the timeline for general plan and zoning code updates. I think that is a long-term, big project that I would like us to have a timeline on so that we know. Because as we know, we keep adding things to your plate and making this list longer every single week, and I think that's a huge priority for us.
And that, Councilmember, I'd like, as you can see under the PDD ordinance and the other planning, review of planning process 9 and 17, that are going to be part of that. Flynn, could you just update us? There's a process you wanted to go through matriculating through the Planning Commission. I don't know if you could add any additional information, at least this evening, on these items?
Certainly, I'd be happy to, Dr. Reddy. What we are in the process of doing right now is, as you'll recall, there's a work plan for implementing the recommendations of the ad hoc PDD subcommittee, or Plan Development District Subcommittee. We have those in process through Planning Commission right now. Once we have those forwarded to City Council, I think we'll be in a position to start work on general plan amendments and making revisions to our zoning to be consistent with the general plan. So there's a number of projects that we have to get through the approval process first before we can start on the general plan. But we do expect to have those out of the way soon.
So might I suggest, I think, Flynn, since there's several moving parts, perhaps over the next couple of weeks, maybe you could put together at least what you would feel would be a draft time frame and milestones, and then we can distribute that to the council.
Certainly, we'd be happy to do that.
That would be great. Thank you.
And to add to that, Dr. Reddy, when we had this discussion a year and a half ago, I think the discussion was a general plan should be updated every 10 years, and we're a little bit past that now, correct?
Yes.
But you also had said at that time that you expected the cost to do a general plan update would probably be in the neighborhood of $1 million.
Right.
So, the discussion would be good to have early so we could look at budgeting it, because that's a big budget item.
Right, because we had budgeted in part for a small zoning code update, but we exactly need to plan our budget long-term for the next years on that. So thank you.
Councilmember Coors?
Great, thank you, Mayor. Pull this list out. So for the October 17th meeting, third one from the bottom, the ordinance prohibiting demolition of Class 3 structures. Just want to make sure we have the ad hoc subcommittee, which is Mayor Pro Tem Roberts and I, and the members of the subcommittee from HSP meet to actually review it before we have a staff report and it comes to council.
Which number was that, Councilman?
Third one from the bottom, the demolition of Class 3 structures. I mean, third one from the bottom of the next Wednesday, 2 weeks from now.
We also
have I see.
a draft in our...
Yeah, on that one, yeah. So we haven't met yet. So it would be good to meet before and get the ordinance final.
There's item 1G in the consent calendar.
Yeah.
Right. We did what we needed to on the moratorium, but now this is the actual ordinance. Which, correct. Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, if I might respond to that.
Yeah, please.
The Historic Site Preservation Board will be considering a draft ordinance at its meeting next week. In fact, that's what I'm working on here at the council meeting as I'm double tasking. But we will, once the Historic Site Preservation Board has a chance to review that, we will then get the City Council Subcommittee and the HSBB Subcommittee together to go through the draft ordinance before we bring it formally to City Council at a public hearing.
And will we be able to do all that in time to get the staff report out the week before?
Well, this is just the moratorium. This is just the extent. I'm sorry, that's...
No, this said ordinance.
It
not
does, and
moratorium.
I think there may be a little bit of confusion. We're coming back, I know for a fact, because I'm working on the item, with the moratorium for 10 months and 15 days. That's a public hearing item that'll be taking place. It'll be presented to the council. There was a consent calendar item tonight in relation to that
So
moratorium.
this is moratorium
So this
only.
is not the ordinance
This is
itself.
not the
Okay.
actual ordinance.
Okay.
We left the word out there. That's moratorium. Thank you.
Well, then that said, you need to have the ordinance probably for the first meeting in November on the future items, right? Because
Correct.
if it's going to be done, we don't need to
Yes.
take the 10 months of the
If
moratorium.
it's done, we certainly
Right.
won't take the
It's
full
the
10
next-
months.
I think Flynn said it's the next HSPB meeting.
Is
so
that realistic time-wise?
sometime in November?
I defer to Director Fack.
Yeah, just whenever you think we should put it on here. So we
But
can plan.
sooner than later, Flynn,
Right.
but what is that realistically?
If the Historic Site Preservation Board takes action next week, then we would be able to forward it to City Council for consideration in November. If they have additional modifications that they want to make prior to forwarding it to City Council, then it may be December before you see it.
Will you
Yeah.
just keep us in the loop on
So
that?
David, maybe just have November, December on the second part. Then on future items, going to number 2, which is approval of boutique hotel incentive program. It's actually hotel renovation program. It's not just boutique hotels, just so folks know what we're talking about. We've talked about it at economic development several times. I think what would be most useful on this would be if we can get the draft, which I know is being worked on, and then Councilmember Holstage and I can deal with it as a subcommittee and with the stakeholders, and then bring it forward to council. That timing could work, but if we can get the draft pretty quick. If not, that may need to be December, because we want to have time to do those meetings. So on 6 and 7, vacation rental ordinance update and cannabis ordinance update, we have to do it here, but in both of those, I think we need to sit down and we can just email with the city manager, city attorney, Mayor Pro Tem Roberts and I, for the date of the meetings that need to lead up to that.
Yes.
Right, the standing subcommittee meetings, the meetings with stakeholders. I think those dates are both workable. I think we need to move on both of those, but I just want to make sure if we just leave it on here for November and December, we'll be here and we'll be like, uh-oh. And then number 12 on the non-smoking ordinance, which I believe the city attorney, you said you have pretty close to ready? Because we need some more time to do this.
I have direction, but that's something that I would
Okay.
want to run by the subcommittee before we presented
Okay,
it.
well, what would be really helpful is when you have the draft based on the direction from our prior meeting, again, we want to go and take it out to the stakeholders. So December works just fine, but we need to, if you can get us a draft in the next 2 weeks, that'll give us time to set up those meetings. That would be very helpful. And the last thing is just, I think we're changing the date of the CVRA only meeting on the maps to Thursday, October 18th, because Tuesday, October 16th was the Chamber Taste of Palm Springs event that draws a lot of people, and the business folks want to be able to come to the meeting when we narrow down the maps.
Right, so, well, that's a question
Tuesday
if
to
we want to
Thursday.
modify it to the 18th. From Tuesday to
Yeah.
Thursday?
So instead of Tuesday, we'll move it to Thursday.
That
As
was a
we've done the
question
rest.
for the group.
So we'll have a 17, just like what we're
17th
doing.
and 18th, yeah.
Okay.
Is that everyone's calendar good?
I don't bring my.
Okay, we just don't want to lose, all our business stakeholders who we've done so many meetings with because that's such a big event. And that's all I have. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Middleton.
Well, most of mine have been taken up, but
We do our best.
we all do. Number 14, improvement for trailhead parking. We've got that moved back to 2019. But by 2019, we will be well into the hiking season, and we will be dealing with quite a few complaints once again from residents in and around the trailhead. So if there is any way to move that up on our priorities, I would appreciate us being able to do that.
And if I could comment on that, councilperson, it's a sort of a complicated issue of trying to find and replace parking, and so we just didn't think we could probably do it over the next couple months. That being said, we can look to early 19. It's partly just an issue that it's complex. We're not exactly sure what the answers are. and we're going to have to engage some, I think, some significant technical assistance to get there. So why don't we do this? Why don't we'll come back at the next meeting, we will look at it and try and get you a more definitive answer in terms of what we need to do to get it to an early 2019 discussion.
I would appreciate that, and if we can, while we are working on this, look at some temporary measures to make it clear where people can and cannot park, particularly at the trailhead there in off of Ramon, which I think is one of the most problematic that we have. It is certainly not the only problematic trailhead that we have. The one in Araby also gets a fair number of complaints, but Ramon seems to lead the list in complaints. Glad that we're moving forward on scooters and shared bikes and all of that. I think that really does need to be a full conversation with our community, because we are going to have some very strong differences of opinion within the community regarding what's the appropriate way to move forward on shared scooters and shared bicycles. Last thing I have, and I see we have something here on the library remodel project. Councilmember Holstage and I are the library subcommittee. It is time for us to begin conversations with College of the Desert over the possibility of sharing library facilities with the College of the Desert, and I would like for Councilmember Holstage and I, as the library subcommittee, to be allowed to work with staff to begin conversations with the College of the Desert trustees and staff over what would be potential arrangements that would allow us to share a library with COD.
Councilmember Middleton, this might be a good place to formally discuss and recommend to the city manager we look at a joint meeting with the Planning Commission on the.
I thought I did that earlier, but I'll repeat that again.
We didn't really get a.
Be happy to repeat that. I think we need to have a joint meeting with the Planning Commission to review their proposals that are going to be coming to us on golf course conversions and on the public benefit related to planned development districts.
Because that was a very, very long discussion today, and that's going to be very complex, and we need to get that on the schedule, Dr. Reddy.
Just a clarification, Councilmember Middleton, the attorney was going to say the moratorium on the golf course conversion is planned to come next week. This is for the larger issue.
This is the moratorium, as I intend it, is to just hold in place what exists until we get to the discussion of what should be our ordinances related to golf course conversions. So what I'm proposing in terms of a joint meeting will be to discuss the actual substance of a golf course conversion ordinance. Lastly, we have a special meeting of the CVRA scheduled for Tuesday, October 16, but it's been brought to our attention that the evening of the 16th is Taste of Palm Springs, the Chamber of Commerce's annual big event. We will have an awful lot of people who would much prefer to be at Taste of Palm Springs. So I would like to see us move that meeting of October 16 to a special meeting on October 18. And I was the one who was conflicted on the 18th, and I have removed my conflict.
Done.
Councilmember Holstage?
I have a question about that. I personally would very much like to attend Taste of Palm Springs.
You can do both now.
Now I can do both, though I do have a conflict on the 18th that I would have to move, which I'm happy to do for the California Voting Rights Act work that we're doing. But where are these dates posted? Aren't they posted everywhere, and haven't we been giving them out? So is there any concern? The subcommittee's been doing that. And my second question is, how firm are these dates for us? Because we are very went above and beyond to set all these extra meetings, which is great. I think it's important. I know the schedule's laid out, but my question is how set in stone are these dates? Are people going to show up on the 16th? Can we consolidate some of these meetings?
So a couple things. One, the first question is, that wasn't in what was mailed out or sent out. We're in the process, we just, I think, approved the second mailer that has the next round of dates. So if that was sent out, that obviously would be more of a concern.
So can we
it's
check?
on the website, but that will get changed as soon as, I think, tomorrow, right, Anthony?
Yeah, so we'll update the website. I have the mailing list of people who have provided their emails from the previous community events, and I can send them an update as well.
Was the date of the 16th mailed out to people? Do you know?
So the mailer included the dates for the community engagement forums, which were the three major ones that we held, not the dates of the council meetings.
I see. And then we're doing a second mailer, and what's that going to include? What dates?
That will include the next, we're planning 3 more. So the subcommittee met today, this morning. Wow, it's a long time ago. So we're going to have 3 more. We're working on the dates for those, but there are going to be 3 more community forums once the council narrows down the maps on the 18th, before we then have to pick a map in November. So there are going to be a whole bunch of smaller ones, but the 3 large ones are the ones that get publicized, where people can really learn, ask questions. There'll be big blow-ups of whatever maps we narrow down it to.
Okay, thank you.
And those dates, we're just working on the spaces and trying to get probably, the plan is one at Demuth Community Center, one at Desert Highlands Community Center, and one at the Convention Center.
Great, thank you.
All right, thanks.
Any other requests for upcoming meeting schedules? And next item is Councilmember reports on League of California's conference recommendation, item 5F. Councilmember Coors.
Thank you, Mayor. I really want to go first because I was going to pick the 2 that no one else went to. And then if they don't cover some of the others, I can go back. So during the California League of Cities annual conference, of which Mayor Pro Tem Roberts, myself, and Councilmember Middleton went this year, as well as City Manager David Reddy, City Attorney Eddie Kotkin. I don't know if Anthony went to his part, or was there a separate section for you? So you went to that as well, since you run it, the clerk's part. So we did have good representation there. We can't really share with each other what we learned or with the public, so we're going to do very short reports. The 2 I went to that no other member of council went to, one was on cannabis, sort of where we are, and it was mostly stuff we know, issues with the black market, issues with taxation, issues with compliance, how things are working, what the state's going to be looking at. But the main thing I think that there was a lot of discussion on was San Diego and Los Angeles have done a major effort in cracking down on all illegal related cannabis activities. And part of the discussion was, well, do people just get let out of jail right away now for that anyway, which is something we had an issue with. But they put such severe fines on the illegals. I think San Diego was like $40 million of fine. So those fines close them down. So it's not necessarily about sending someone to jail. It's about stopping the illegal activity. So I think it would be really helpful, and the Cannabis Subcommittee can talk to this, to set up a meeting with the city attorney and maybe the police chief to really talk about what some other cities are doing. And enough fines, they have to close down. And so just to be creative, because the illegals are hurting our licensed, permitted dispensaries. They're not charging taxes, and there are all kinds of problems with them. So I thought that was really useful information, and we have some cities that are doing a lot. The other one was on best employment practices that the city manager and I were at, which dealt with how to handle employee complaints, especially if it's against one of us or someone like the city manager, where there are clearly conflicts, and to set up policies so they're not one-offs where you're figuring out how to do an investigation, but have a policy in place to do outside investigations when there are those conflicts, so that it's not necessary to come before council, potentially have share an employees who filed the complaint, and to really do it so it's just automatic when those happen. So I think there's some really good information, and we're trying to set up an ad hoc employment practices subcommittee to talk about that process so we can actually have that kind of policy in place. So those are the only two. I think I was the only one at. So if there's nothing that the rest are covered, I'm done.
Councilmember Middleton.
Well, I got to go to a few. One that I don't think anyone else attended was a presentation by the city manager, city attorney, and a council member in the city of Beaumont, and it dealt with the crisis that occurred in their city and some of the lessons that were learned due to the corruption that existed within that city. Some takeaways from that were, again, the importance of citizen involvement and citizen monitoring of what expenditures are being paid. It truly was one individual who truly started the process of identifying that there was something wrong. Ultimately, that gentleman was elected to city council, and then a majority of city council that came forward. They were not strict with their financial audits. There was a critical breakdown and separation of duties when it came to contracting and payment processes. But the last and the most important part of the failure there was the failure of the city council to provide adequate oversight to what was taking place within their city, to ask appropriate questions when it came to the disbursement of money and the processes that went on. Something that I was not aware of until the meeting, while millions of dollars were misappropriated and taken, most of that money was not from the city of Beaumont. Most of the money was actually money that came from the Western Riverside County Organization of Governments, the Western County's version of CVAG, and it was money for transportation projects that was due from the city of Beaumont to the Western Regional Western Riverside County Organization of Governments. I can't say that very fast. But Beaumont at one time was removed by a vote of that organization because of their failure to pay money that was due to the organization for money that are for projects that took place within their city. Second very interesting presentation was one on pensions. It was an extremely detailed review of legal precedences and challenges that are going on to pension systems. We all hear anecdotally that, gee, wouldn't it be nice if we moved to some different type of pension system? But when you look at what's actually taking place within the state of California, the legal challenges are much more nuanced, and what is being challenged frequently are questions as to whether or not employers and employee organizations have the ability to collectively bargain for changes in pension systems that would be an agreement that is reached by both the bargaining unit and by management that might change some of the benefits moving forward for some employees. But clearly, this is going to be a very large area of law as we move forward, and I'm glad that I had an opportunity to participate in staying on top of that. There was a financial review section that was dominated solely by conversations on pension obligations and Proposition 6. A union management negotiation session where we had both a long-term representative of police unions and a long-term representative of municipalities engaging back and forth in dialogue. And what came across is how easy it is for communications to break down between employee organizations and management, and the damage that can be done to a community because of those breakdowns. And these are two sides negotiating contracts, but the extent to which you have individuals with expertise, experience, and some degree of diplomacy on both sides who are working towards solutions, you will certainly save yourself tremendous amount of grief that can cause lasting damage within a city. Last couple of things on a personal note. I attended the LGBT caucus. I probably shouldn't have, because I walked away having been elected the vice president of that organization. And
I voted no.
I was very, and Councilmember Coors was there and voted for me or against me. And I'm very pleased to have been elected by Riverside County to an at-large position on their executive committee. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. So I attended a number of lectures as well, and the one that stood out for me, and the one that is of greatest concern with respect to how we develop in the future, is it was a CEQA change, and there's something moving through the state. It's SB 743, and it will. And Flynn, I don't know how familiar you are with this yet. Lisa and I both attended this particular session, and what concerned me, and my sense was everybody in the room, which meant many, many cities, and there were many people from the Coachella Valley there as well, many of our local colleagues, and it was a large, well-attended session. But SB 743 would have a significant change in how traffic impacts are viewed on new development. And currently how we look at traffic with respect to new developments is it was always measured on level of service. And level of service can mean a number of things, but traffic impacts is a big part of that. So in other words, they call it auto delay, we call it traffic. But one of the things we look at is how much traffic will a new development develop or create in a certain area or neighborhood or part of the city. And it was very, very important because it could determine the viability of a new development in your community and its impacts. And what SB 743 proposes to do is change that. And going away from something called level of service to vehicle miles traveled. And vehicle miles traveled just simply means how long does it take to get to the development and get away from the development. And this is of great concern because this could open up a tremendous amount of more opportunity for bigger and larger developments in areas without paying as much attention to their impacts on where they're going. And I don't know exactly where this is in the process right now. Flynn, are you familiar with this at all? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but do you know where SB 743 is at this particular moment?
I don't know where it is in the process, but we are aware of the proposed changes and have been watching them.
And would you agree that this would have a significant impact on large-scale developments that we're looking at?
It will significantly change the way that we evaluate projects. You're correct.
So it's something that we as a city need to pay attention to. It would be smart if the community, as much as they can, pay attention to these sort of things, because we're all concerned about how we grow and the type of development that we have. And this council in particular is very sensitive to the impacts of growth, not only here in Palm Springs, but in the Valley. And this one change, this one bill, could have significant effects. So I wanted to report on that specifically, and I'll leave others to other reports to my colleagues who attended similar sessions.
Anything else?
I have a question about that. Is the league taking a position on that bill?
You know, that's a good question. I don't know. Lisa, do you remember if the league was taking a position? I sensed that they were against it, but I'm not for certain. I'm not certain on that.
I don't recall, but Wasn't it already passed and approved and signed into law?
I thought it wasn't quite there yet. I thought it was still in process.
I thought it was in the implementation stage.
It was a 2013 bill, so I think it's the updates, the updates that are being done.
So,
I'm just looking online.
Flynn, if you could double check that, because that's pretty serious, and the Planning Commission is going to need to be fully re-educated on that as well. And the public's going to need to know about that. It's going to change a lot for us.
I could be wrong, but I think it's in implementation.
Either way, we need to be prepared for it.
Any other discussion? Okay. Next, public comments. Non-agenda items. This time has been set aside for members of the public to address the City Council on items of general interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of the city. Although the City Council values your comments, pursuant to the Brown Act, it generally cannot take any action on items not listed on the posted agenda. 2 minutes will be assigned to each speaker. Currently, we have 3 speakers in queue. First is Brad Anderson, followed by Alicia Espinoza, then Alan Worthy.
Hi, good evening, Brad Anderson, Ransom Mirage. I know I have 2 minutes. Can I have 22? No, I'm kidding. Of course. No, I wanted to talk about the Coachella Valley Mosquito Vector District just momentarily. The Coachella Valley Mosquito and Vector Control District out of Indio. They represent your city and the whole valley, really. And the lack of transparency from that organization is I have nothing nice to say about that, so I'm going to go right into what I think your city should be able to do for the Aedes aegypti that's going on right now. It's almost epidemic. It really is. It's spread through this valley. It's just out of hand. And I think as a city, I know they're doing some truck-mounted spraying, and I've done tests on the aerial spraying with the VectorBack WDG, and it does work. But for truck spraying, it's questionable. I haven't done the test on that, but I'm imagine most of the cars parked along the street are really getting a dose of that. But and I don't know if most people know what larvicidin is. It's just like having a glass or a glass of water in here and just putting pesticides on everything just to get that glass of water. So it's it's not efficient, and there's better ways to do that. But and I think as a city, you could do that with just trapping. There's specialized trapping for this type of mosquito, and you can use that. And of course, education, especially with the rains. I don't know if you got rain here, but in Indio it was just downpour. And so empty anything you have around your house. Put screening on drains. Saucers around potted plants, a big deal. You know, spray them out every week. You don't have to scrub them, but spray them out. Do what you can. Push those mosquitoes out to catch basins and retention basins where vector control can get them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Our next speaker will be Alicia Espinoza, then Alan Worthy. Anyone else wishes to speak, please put in a request at this time.
Good evening. I spoke to somebody about allocating 3 minutes.
Good.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Alicia Espinoza, and I'm a resident of the city of Moreno Valley. I'm here because couple of council meetings, Captain David Kolowicz addressed the mayor pro tem and council members of Palm Springs regarding some allegations of Chad Bianco making some anti-gay allegations at a meet and greet that took place in Moreno Valley. He was not invited to that meet and greet. However, he did show up. He showed up to intimidate, harass, and taunt Chad Bianco by telling him this is not your city. Captain Karlowicz was the supervisor for Deputy Kevin Duffy, who sexually molested numerous young boys in the city of Hemet. And one of the victims, Cody, a 12-year-old, who was sexually molested by Kevin Duffy, in a RV that is owned by the Riverside Sheriffs. He took him in there and pulled down his underwear. And I know that Stan Sniff failed to get him arrested, failed to do procedure protocol. Anybody else would have been arrested. One of the things that concerns me as a parent is that I'm a mother. When a child is taken away his innocence, you pretty much take away his soul. So I just want to let this get clear that Chad Bianco respected David Krulowicz, and by no means did he make any remarks of such nature. Okay? Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Espinoza. Our last speaker is Alan Worthy. If anyone else wishes to speak, please put in a card at this time.
Good evening, Mr. Cocken, picking up where we left off and from 2 weeks ago. I'm still waiting to hear from a cop. I need police reports on the fraud document that was turned into you, that was submitted and committed on the court across the street. I had a conversation with the DA's office yesterday about it, and then a phone call back from Riverside after having talked to Indio. I also have Eisenhower on perjury charges, Mr. Kotkin, so I need someone to address those things. The first one pertains to my condo, which is why I was getting the phone calls and the text messages to beat the fuck out of me, quote, end quote. For some strange reason, I have the names of 5 cops here that don't seem to think that's a crime. But as I've suspected, it is a crime. Penal Code 422. Those 5 cops are Sergeant Flynn, Andre Beach, Richard, the dispatch, and believe it or not, Sergeant Stearns. Went round and round that that's not a crime, but it is a crime. I just cited the penal code. Very strange. Now, all of this dates back to the initial 3 criminals who committed these crimes. Elder and dependent abuse, identity theft, taking excess of $3.2 million, and committing aggravated white-collar crime. Okay, and to shut me up about it came the federal offenses of Officer Thomas Becker. So it's just been one big party, okay? May I have the name tomorrow, Mr. Kotkin, of the cop who did package this case against the Pond family? Now, no doubt the Pond family is more wealthy than the Worthy Allen families, but the Allen side of the Worthy family is now flat broke thanks to the caregiver and his co-conspirators having made off with this grand larceny.
Mr. Worthy.
Yeah, I heard the bell. Thank you. I expect a phone call tomorrow about these ongoing crimes.
Okay, we have any other speakers? Seeing none, we will close this portion of public comments. The next item is City Council and City Manager comments. We've already done agenda development, so we have anyone who wishes to speak? Mayor Pro Tem?
Okay. Councilman Kors is in the...
No. No, I have his Councilmember Holstage.
Okay. Okay. So, you know, we don't get a chance often to speak with our subcommittees about ideas we might have on the things they're working on. And, you know, I'm so impressed with what the city's doing, and particularly with what our subcommittee's doing with respect to homeless. And we're making real inroads. My fear, though, is that it's not publicized enough what we're getting done. So I find that in pretty much all of my conversations with the general public, and very often when I'm out with friends, the conversation will go to the homeless issues nationally, but certainly how it affects people here in Palm Springs. And I try to relay what we're doing and the inroads that our subcommittee's made. And what I hear consistently is that people would like to do more for the homeless. They don't know exactly what to do. Most people aren't going to be comfortable dealing with homeless people directly. They're not necessarily going to be comfortable working in shelters or working with Arlene and Well in the Desert. And I got to thinking about that. And again, because we can't discuss this outside of this room, I had an idea that I wanted to throw out or propose a concept that I wondered if the homeless subcommittee had considered at all. And I was thinking back to a time that I had more time to watch television. And that seems like a long time ago. But what I remember very distinctly was that there were organizations, and I know they still exist, where everyday people could adopt kids in other countries and adopt kids here in the state, well, pretty much in other countries, by simply getting a profile of that child, and they would commit, the person that was doing the supposed adoption would then commit to a monthly amount and could actually track that child and could actually have their money go to certain aspects for that child. Now, I know it's a little funny in concept, but I wondered if we had ever considered a program, or if anybody's considered a program, of maybe adopting a friend, where we have homeless people who have very specific identities and profiles and lives, and have we ever given the public an opportunity to help somebody specifically from a distance, where they might commit financially to that person, or maybe they want to get more involved with that person and help in placement and resources, but give them an opportunity to get as close or as far as they want to a specific person with a name, with a story, and with a history that they could track. And I want to believe I'm not the only person who's ever thought of this, and I wondered if it's ever come up in your work. And I'm addressing the subcommittee right now.
Certainly.
As a general matter, sure, we can agendize a full discussion.
No, I'm just simply asking if a concept in my head has ever been looked at, and it can be as simple as a yes or no, or as much as they can elaborate on having ever heard this.
I'll just give general information. It's not something that is before the council or would come before. One, I thought where you were going was your council report idea that you brought up last time, like doing a report to the public about a newsletter.
Which we are moving forward on, I understand.
That would be a really good first topic because I respond to a lot of emails, dozens of emails saying that we're not doing anything on homelessness, and people are really concerned about homelessness in Palm Springs. And then I detail, you know, all of the things that we're doing on homelessness, all of the funding, all of the programs that we're involved in, all of the work of our police department and Path of Life and Well in the Desert. And people always respond, oh, wow, you're really doing a lot. So I do think that there's that sense that people don't know, and you're right, I think a lot of people don't know how to help. We do have our standing homelessness task force meeting, and so the best way for people to learn about what the city is doing and get involved is to go to those. So our next one is October 18th at 4 p.m. And in those meetings, I've asked some of the service providers. Obviously, the city isn't service provider and providing direct services, that we fund a lot of services, and our police department provides direct services and our crisis response team. But we've asked them, what can we do? What can people do who want to get involved? Obviously, those nonprofits need money. And, you know, it's interesting because I know the fundraising committee was talking about that, about getting community support for different events. One thing that Path of Life has said, the biggest problem right now facing our community is that there is funding for vouchers for people to find somewhere to live, but there aren't private landlords to take the vouchers and provide the housing. So I've asked Path of Life again and again, and they say we need people in the Palm Springs community to open up a room or an apartment that they own, or a home, and actually house people. So that's one way. So we're doing a lot on it. I think it's interesting because I think there is a community support element, that people do want to help on this, and it would be good to give them a way to do that and to be educated about all of the actions that we're doing in Palm Springs.
So let me just add to that. I haven't really heard that idea, and it's something we could definitely talk with the providers. Is that a kind of fundraising idea, and how obviously you need people who are comfortable having themselves be that person, and how that would work. But any idea is worth exploring. But one thing that we do know that, and we've talked to some folks who wanted to do fundraising on it, which didn't really materialize, but something we really should reconsider, figuring out how we can do, is reaching out to landlords, sort of bigger landlords, because the success rate with the Path of Life people, because Path of Life pays the rent ahead of time. So, once they're in, the landlords really like working with them. But for fundraising, one of the gaps is keeping people from losing their apartments when rents go up, which we know are going up in Palm Springs, and raising money for that rental, the difference in the rent, to keep someone from becoming homeless where we then have to get them a voucher to find a new place. And this may be one way to do that. So it's something we should at least we can talk about with the providers if this is a way to get people to engage.
What I'd like to do, though, is I probably wasn't clear, and I'm sorry. This wasn't really about fundraising. It was more about connecting people more directly with the human aspect of a person living on the street. So that person actually getting to know that person, even from a distance, even if it's from a profile. Because what we find in any type of foster situation or a big brother or a big sister situation is when you can get a human being connected to another human being, even if it's just through paper, there could be a greater commitment to staying with that person and being invested in seeing them succeed. And it's more about a program that would align people with people. So what you're doing and what all these county resources are doing, and I should say what we're doing as a city, is finding resources, putting people together with those resources, and along that same track, finding the money to cover it all. I'm wondering if we couldn't go bigger and get more help on an individual basis if we had some sort of a program where people could, everyday people like me, could know of a person that I was helping, that I was having a direct impact on their life. And maybe when they got to a certain point, I'd want to meet that person. And I might want to be more involved in their lives. Or maybe not. Maybe I just simply want to write a check and maybe hear back that person, that through our resources, those dollars went into an account to keep somebody's rent going for a year, or that my dollars ensured that they got drug treatment that they needed. So maybe I'm not making myself clear, but it's less about money and more about engaging a much larger community in dealing with the homeless problem. It seems like there are satellites of people and cities being part of that are doing all this work. And the greater population just sees homeless at their worst, sees them on the worst days of their lives, doesn't really know other than, yeah, you can write a check to some organization that'll help the homeless. I can't help wondering if we couldn't engage people in a much bigger spectrum if we actually engaged them person to person. And the reason I came up with that is, people were saying, we need to get shelters, more shelters, and we need to do this, and we need to build more housing. And yes, we need to do all those things. That looks like a very steep uphill climb in many situations. To even the thought of engaging landlords who are willing to take a homeless person into their building or into their house, and what condition that person would have to be for that person to feel welcome. And I worry about the low percentages of that, of NIMBYism, of all the things that come into play. But if we have people that are actually volunteering to be advocates for not the whole homeless population, but for an individual, I wonder if there's something there, and I'm throwing that out as a wonder rather than trying to inflict it on a subcommittee that's already hardworking.
I like that, but I just want to be just realistically, people would have to be trained in all kinds of mental health and addiction issues and everything that goes with that if they're going to be engaging. You need an organization to oversee it. Mm-hmm. We can't do that. We don't have the staff to do that. And every organization that's doing this work now is stretched thin. I mean, we have 2 crisis teams on the ground, and it often takes them 100 or 200 times before a person will even take a bottle of water.
Again, I'm not questioning resources.
I'm just saying to get someone to talk to someone.
I'm saying that might be way down the line. You may never talk to this person.
So then how are you going to engage them with this person without them knowing who the person is?
Simply through a profile. So if we know through our resources who a homeless person is, let's just say a John or Jane Doe, that is in process, that is in line to get housing or in line to get drug treatment, or they're in a process in the system, that we could match them with a volunteer, an individual who may just want to connect with a human being, maybe not directly, but through their profile. They might be willing to write a check. They might be willing to get involved. I'm not saying that they have to be fully trained in drug addiction and then go in and help that person get off drugs.
I'm not sure how an organization would run it, but I would talk to the folks at Path of Life and see if that's something they would want to.
Councilmember Kors and I have a meeting with Path of Life and Well in the Desert and Greg Rodriguez with the county. So we will raise it there. I think there are confidentiality issues with sharing people's information or their photo. But I agree. The problem is that people have an idea of what someone who's homeless looks like and is like. But if you look at the data from the HARC study from the Coachella Valley Association of Governments homeless subcommittee that we're doing, you can see actually a huge portion of the people who are homeless are kids. I think it was like 26% or something like that overall. So it's a big portion. So I agree there's a misconception about who's homeless. You know, we see people on the streets and that doesn't always represent everyone who's homeless. So there's a lot of public education that goes with that. That's the work that we do on our task force. One thing that I think is really effective that Path of Life does is, and I try to send it to you all every time I get it, is they give us little stories about who they've helped in Palm Springs. So maybe they tell us that this week I helped a 79-year-old woman who was living in her car at this, you know, in Palm Springs. So those are really humanizing stories. So maybe if we can work with them to get more of those stories out to the public and share them, not just here, but to the public, I think that would be really helpful. And then we'll think about other ways that we can do that.
Yeah, and if something like that was even feasible, I'm sure it would require a large group of volunteers that just worked on that program, that worked directly with the resources to get people who wanted the help to work out creating the profiles, doing the tracking of individuals. But again, that's all work that could be done from a great distance from the people themselves, and it would give everyday people something to work on. So just an idea, and I thought I'd throw it out because I don't know where else to do it unless we do it up here. That's all I have, Mayor.
Councilmember Holstage?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Since the Mayor Pro Tem wants to get so involved in homelessness, which I think is great because this whole council does. But I did get a request from Palm Springs Home Run 5K and Expo. And so you might remember that they applied for a grant through our grant process. It's through the Seventh-day Adventist Church. They're doing a separate 5K run, which we agreed to fund in kind for the costs of doing this run. So they've asked, and I think they've reached out to each council member and the mayor about supporting this event with our name. And so the city of Palm Springs is already supporting the event because we're underwriting it in some way. But it's the first time that they're doing it, and they're trying to get more support and trying to raise a lot of money. All the proceeds of the race go to Path of Life and the work that they're doing directly in our community. So they asked me to ask the council, and this is the only time I get to talk to everyone, to lend our name, like the Palm Springs City Council or Mayor and City Council Home Run 5K and Expo. And I thought it would be a good way to support that.
So do you want it in the name of the council or the city or our individual names?
So I mean, since the city is a sponsor, certainly they can say the city of Palm Springs. But that's not what
they're proposing, and that's why I have to talk about it here, is they want council members and the mayor who are able to actually participate and lend our names because they're doing it a baseball theme. And so they want us to, sort of like the AIDS walk where you have a team, to lead a team and have your name. So maybe we could give our individual names. We can each do that independently. We don't need a city action for that.
I'm not sure I completely understand what's being discussed.
She just wants to know if we will allow our names to be used in conjunction with this event, right, Christy? Or show
as
up?
Participants?
Or just lend our name.
Lend our name like the Palm Springs City Council or Palm Springs, I think City Council includes all of us, but however we want to word it, Palm Springs Mayor and City Council Home Run 5K and Expo. So I'm asking my fellow council members if they'll consider lending their names.
I would just suggest, as a general matter, they certainly can use the Palm Springs because you are a sponsor, so technically they could. If individuals wanted to let them use your name, you could. There's nothing preventing that.
We do it all the time. I mean, we get calls constantly to lend our names to things, and
but Dr. Reddy, when I asked you about this, you said there was some issues about actually using the term city council or mayor or anything associated with this.
Well, it would just be more of a, more of a discretionary. It's usually when the city sponsors, it's the city of Palm Springs. The situation hasn't really come up, a council or a mayor's race. It was the mayor's race previously, but that's when the city sponsored the full thing at that like $70,000 level, and that was the mayor's individual initiative. In this case, they certainly could use, the city of Palm Springs, but I'm not sure if any council member wanted to, let's say they could use their name, there would be no prohibition against it that I'm aware of.
There's not a prohibition of you using your names individually. Again, I'm not sure I understand what's being asked.
What they want to do is they want to call it the Palm Springs City Council or Palm Springs Mayor and City Council Home Run Race. That's what they'd like to call
it. Well, there's certainly no prohibition against it that I'm aware of.
There's nothing that makes that illegal.
Right, that's not what
People
we're
do,
asking.
at the risk of pointing out the obvious, people.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Councilman Middleton?
I'm very supportive of this and very happy to lend my name. I'm a little nervous about creating a practice where a private organization, even doing incredibly good work, we attach for an event that we have no responsibility over the official name of the city of Palm Springs or the official name of the Palm Springs City Council. I think it would be better if we just simply, each and every one of us, attached individually our names. And I don't see any reason why those names can't include mayor, mayor pro tem, or council member, but that's a little different than the city attaching its name to a privately organized event.
We do frequently allow, I think, any event that we fund to use the City of Palm Springs logo and name in advertising. So we already do that, but I'm fine with that if we just want to each make individual decisions about being involved in lending our name like we do for other events. I just thought because there have been mayor's races in the past and, the City of Palm Springs is sort of, that's a general term versus having the full city council support is more helpful. So
sponsored by the City of Palm Springs is actually correct. Including our logo as a sponsor is something that we do regularly. Titling something that we have no responsibility for running, the Palm Springs City Council event, is what gives me pause.
okay, so if you would like to be involved in that event, which again supports Path of Life Ministries, which we're a big partner of, please let the organizers know because they've asked individually and they've heard back from some of us.
Just thinking out loud here, most of these events you can do a certain level, like a team can. I mean, if they have a thing where it's like $1,000 or something, we could each contribute a certain amount from our contingency funds, and it could be the council member team or something, and it wouldn't actually put our name on it, but it would have us as a sponsor. How about that?
It's a great idea. Let's think about that. Thank you. So that was my easy ask for council. So my harder ask is HARC. JR, what does that stand for, HARC? The Health Assessment Research Council.
You'll never forget that.
Let's see. They've requested $10,000 to fund. What they're doing is a health assessment of the entire Coachella Valley. And so they asked, they're doing a full project which costs about $700,000 to do a full health assessment of each city and the county overall for the Coachella Valley. And so they've asked each city to give $10,000 in this cycle. It's something that they gave in the past and that they've done in the past and that cities funded. And so they asked for this in the grant process and we didn't fund it. However, I asked for more information. I think I said I was going to do that. So the last survey cycle, and this data is really important for grant funding and other health funding. Desert Hot Springs gave $5,000, Coachella gave $5,000, La Quinta gave $2,500. And then this survey cycle, the cities of Desert Hot Springs has given $5,000, Indio, Coachella, Cathedral City have agreed also to fund it. And so I think that we as the city of Palm Springs should think about funding this with our partner cities. If all of these other cities are funding it, I think it's an important project, and I would be remiss, I think, not to be on that list of cities funding health data. So I know it's not budgeted for this cycle, and so I asked the city manager, and he said we could reopen some of that grant funding. We held some in contingency.
Yeah, I was going to say, we have a reserve.
We have a big reserve, so we could do that, or we could use other funding or contingency funds.
Dr. Reddy, I'm a little uncomfortable with this discussion because it's a budget item.
Yeah, I think
agendized.
Councilmember Holsted, you'd be asking me to agendize it the next
Yes,
meeting. And basically, you have that unallocated portion in your sponsorship. You agendize it and give me direction then.
Yeah, it sounds like an agenda item
Yes,
to me.
thank you.
I think we left 50 or 60,000, didn't we? For these, that's why we do it every year to keep for these contingencies. Okay, I have a very simple question for the city manager. Councilmember Kors and I discussed this the other day with just the two of us. David, on the entrance to the parking lot at the Hyatt, it's got it's got very neat looking letters that say parking, public parking. Could we possibly do maybe a smaller but the same type of lettering before that, and maybe after that says free public parking? Because I think the hot people coming into town who are going to the downtown, that's where they're going. They're not going to go over by the museum. They're going to go down Palm Canyon. If they saw the word free in front of the Hyatt, they would. I think right now people think it's public parking that belongs to the hotel, and then it's probably charging. So could we put a free sign up there?
Yeah, Mayor, we can do that. And also, as part of this, what we need to do is add some additional street signage coming into the city that directs people to where our free parking is. So we will do both of those, and we'll report.
It wouldn't be.
Back
I mean, they're plastic letters that have been cut out and glued up there, so it shouldn't be that difficult. Okay, great. Jeff, mission accomplished. No, yeah, okay. Okay, we have any? Yeah. No. Okay. Any other items? Okay. Seeing no other items. Nothing. We will adjourn to the study session on Thursday, October the 4th, tomorrow night at 6:00 p.m. in the Council Chamber, City Hall, preceded by. Do we have a closed session tomorrow? Okay. This is wrong then. At City Hall, 6:00. Okay. I think we are adjourned.